The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet has catalogued thousands of species, mapped countless star systems, and yet the cosmos still finds ways to surprise us. What happens when something or someone defies every sensor reading, every scientific model, every rational explanation the Federation has ever developed? Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise-D, staring at the view screen with the measured calm of a man who had faced Q, negotiated with Romulans, and survived the Borg. But the readings scrolling across his armrest console made no sense whatsoever. "Report, Mr. Data," Picard said. The android's fingers moved across his console with inhuman precision. "Captain, sensors detect a subspace rupture forming directly ahead, bearing 270 Mark 6. The energy signature does not match any known phenomenon in our database." On screen, the view screen shimmered, and there it was, a tear in space itself, pulsing with colors that shouldn't exist. Violet lightning crackled around its edges, and through the rift, Picard could see something else. Not space. Not subspace. Something fundamental and wrong, like staring into the gaps between dimensions. "Shields up," Picard commanded. "Red alert." The klaxon wailed. Throughout the Enterprise, 1,500 souls moved to battle stations. A well-oiled machine responding to threats they couldn't yet comprehend. At tactical, Lieutenant Worf's hands moved to the weapons console, his Klingon instincts screaming danger even before the sensors confirmed it. "The rupture is expanding," Data reported. "At current rate, it will intersect our position in 47 seconds. Helm. Reverse thrusters. Get us." The rupture exploded outward. Space itself screamed. The Enterprise shuddered as gravitational waves slammed into the deflector shields, alarms shrieking across every station. Picard gripped his chair as the deck tilted 15 degrees, inertial dampeners struggling to compensate for forces that violated every law of motion. And then, impossibly, a figure shot through the rift. Not a ship. Not a probe. A man. He tumbled through the void of space, arms outstretched, a circular shield clutched in one hand. His uniform was wrong blue and red, stars and stripes. Nothing like any Federation design. For exactly 3 seconds, he hung suspended in the vacuum, turning slowly in zero gravity, and Picard saw his face. Human. Male. Caucasian. Approximately 30 years old. Expression. Determined. Not panicked. Eyes. Searching for something to grab. Some way to control his trajectory. Then the figure slammed into the Enterprise's forward hull. "Collision on Deck 10. Section 12. Data announced. "Hull breach contained by emergency force fields." "Captain. The individual is alive." "Alive?" Picard stood. "In open space without a suit?" "Confirmed. Life signs are stable. More than stable. They are remarkably strong. I am reading elevated metabolic activity, enhanced muscular density, and accelerated cellular regeneration." "Captain. This individual's physiology is far beyond baseline human norms." Behind them, the subspace rupture collapsed in on itself with a flash of light, sealing shut as if it had never existed. Whatever doorway had opened, it was now closed. And they had a visitor. "Transporter room, this is the captain. Lock onto the individual on our hull and beam him directly to sickbay. Security team to sickbay immediately. And someone get me Dr. Crusher." The bridge hummed with controlled urgency. Picard moved to Data's station, studying the bioscan data with growing fascination. Enhanced strength. Accelerated healing, bone density 40% above human average. Whatever this man was, he had been changed at a fundamental level. "Transporter room reports successful beam up," Worf announced. "Security is in position. Dr. Crusher is standing by." Picard tapped his comm badge. "Mr. Worf, you're with me. Data, you have the bridge. Begin a full analysis of that subspace rupture signature. I want to know where it came from and if it's coming back." "Aye. Captain." The turbolift doors hissed open, and Picard stepped inside with Worf close behind. As the lift descended toward Deck 12, the Klingon's hand rested on his phaser. "Ready for anything." "Something troubles you, Lieutenant?" Worf's jaw tightened. A warrior who survives the void without protection is either very fortunate or very dangerous. "I suspect the latter." The lift opened onto the corridor outside sickbay. 2 security officers stood flanking the doors. Phasers drawn but not aimed. Inside, Picard could hear Dr. Crusher's voice, steady and professional, asking questions. The doors parted. The man sat on a biobed, still wearing his strange uniform. Up close, Picard could see the details: a star on his chest, vertical red and white stripes across his abdomen, scale-like armor that looked almost medieval in design. The circular shield rested against the biobed, its surface polished and impossibly pristine despite the journey through dimensional rifts and hard vacuum. Dr. Crusher stood nearby, medical tricorder in hand. Her expression caught between clinical fascination and deep concern. "Captain, this man's cellular structure is extraordinary. Every system is operating at peak efficiency. I've never seen anything like it." The man looked up. His eyes were blue clear, direct, assessing, not the eyes of someone confused or afraid. The eyes of a soldier evaluating the situation, cataloging threats, identifying exits. When he spoke, his voice was steady, with an accent. Picard's universal translator identified as North American English, mid-20th century. "I don't know where I am," the man said, "but I'm guessing you're in charge." He nodded toward Picard. "Name's Steve Rogers. Captain, United States Army." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the sickbay's advanced equipment, the glowing panels, the technology that would look like magic to someone from his era. "And I think I'm a long way from home." Picard stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back, falling into the familiar rhythm of first contact protocol. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation starship Enterprise. You are aboard a vessel of the United Federation of Planets, and according to our sensors, you've just traveled through a subspace anomaly from somewhere else entirely." Rogers stood slowly, testing his balance. He was shorter than Picard had expected, perhaps 5'10", but the way he moved carried absolute confidence. When he reached for his shield, 3 phasers tracked the motion, but Rogers simply lifted it, examining its surface for damage. "Quantum realm," Rogers said quietly. "We were running an operation. Trying to retrieve something from. It doesn't matter. Something went wrong. There was light, and energy, and I felt like I was being pulled apart and put back together. Then I was in space, heading toward your ship." He looked at Picard directly. "I know this sounds impossible, Mr. Rogers," Picard said gently. "In my experience, impossible is simply a word we use for phenomena we don't yet understand. You're clearly from another place. Perhaps another time. The question now is, what do we do next?" Rogers met his gaze without flinching. "That depends. Are you the good guys?" Worf bristled. "We serve the United Federation of Planets. We explore. We defend. We uphold." "That's not what I asked." Rogers' voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I've seen plenty of people who claim to serve noble causes while doing terrible things. So I'll ask again. Captain Picard, are you the good guys?" For a moment, sickbay was silent. Then Picard allowed himself a slight smile. "That, Mr. Rogers, is a question philosophers have debated for centuries. But I will say this. We try to be. Every day. We try." He gestured toward the door. "Perhaps you'd like to see our ship, meet our crew, and judge for yourself?" Rogers considered this, then nodded slowly. "I'd appreciate that." He secured his shield to his back with practiced ease. "One more question, though. What year is this?" Dr. Crusher glanced at Picard, then back to Rogers. "By your calendar. It's 2366. You're in the 24th century. Rogers absorbed this without visible reaction. 3 centuries. 300 years of history. Progress. Loss, everything and everyone he'd known. Gone, but he simply straightened his shoulders and looked at Picard. "Then I guess I've got a lot to learn. Lead the way, Captain. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper." As they walked toward the corridor, Picard found himself studying this impossible visitor. Steve Rogers carried himself like a man who had seen war, survived it, and refused to let it break him. The Federation was built on principles of peace, exploration, and understanding. But sometimes, Picard thought, the galaxy needed those who remembered why those principles were worth fighting for. The doors to sickbay closed behind them, and somewhere in the distance, sensors picked up faint tachyon traces after images of the rupture that had brought Captain America into a universe that had left his kind of heroism behind, or so they thought. The observation lounge had become an impromptu briefing room, its tall windows offering a view of stars streaking past at warp velocity. Captain America stood with his back to the windows, shield resting against the conference table, while Picard's senior staff arranged themselves around the room. The tension was palpable, not hostile, but cautious. First contact protocols existed for alien species, not dimensional refugees from Earth's past. Commander William Riker sat at Picard's right. His posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Evaluating. Counselor Deanna Troi occupied her usual seat, her empathic senses extended, reading the emotional currents in the room. Data stood near a wall console, his positronic brain already processing millions of variables. And Worf remained by the door, a silent guardian whose hand never strayed far from his phaser. "Mr. Rogers," Picard began, "before we proceed, I should explain where you are and what's happened. You've traveled not just through space, but through dimensions. The quantum realm you mentioned, we have theoretical models for such phenomena, but practical traversal is beyond our current capabilities. The fact that you survived suggests either remarkable fortune or something unique about your physiology." Rogers nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The serum. Back in 1943, I was part of a program, Project Rebirth. They enhanced me, made me stronger, faster, more resilient. It was supposed to create super soldiers to fight the Nazis." He paused, old memories flickering across his face. "I was the only one who survived the process intact." "Fascinating," Data said, stepping forward. "Dr. Crusher's scans indicate genetic modifications at the cellular level, but the techniques used are far more sophisticated than mid-20th century science should have allowed. Your creator was clearly well ahead of their time." "Dr. Erskine was brilliant," Rogers said quietly. "And he died the day after he made me. The formula died with him." Troy leaned forward slightly. "I sense great loss in you, Captain Rogers. But also determination. You've experienced profound displacement before. This isn't your first time waking up in an unfamiliar world." Rogers met her gaze, and something passed between them, recognition of shared understanding. "I went into the ice in 1945. Woke up 70 years later. Learned everyone I knew was gone. The world had moved on. And I had to find a new place in it." He looked around the room. "This feels familiar. Except now it's not 70 years, it's over 300. And I'm not even in my own universe anymore." "Actually," Data interjected, "preliminary analysis of the subspace rupture suggests you may have originated from a parallel dimension where certain physical constants differ slightly from our own. This could explain why your shield, composed of a material you call vibranium, exhibits unusual properties when exposed to our technology." Riker raised an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" "When Dr. Crusher attempted to scan the shield with a medical tricorder, the device's circuits overloaded. The shield appears to absorb energy in ways our sensors cannot fully measure. It may be one of the most remarkable materials I have encountered." Rogers lifted the shield from the table, his grip familiar and comfortable. "Vibranium. Supposedly the strongest metal on Earth, my Earth, anyway. It absorbs kinetic energy, disperses impacts. Saved my life more times than I can count." He set it down again, the metal ringing softly against the table. "But I'm guessing you didn't bring me here just to talk about my equipment." Picard folded his hands on the table. "No. We need to determine what to do with you, Captain Rogers. Starfleet Command will want answers about how you arrived, whether the rupture poses an ongoing threat, and whether there's any possibility of returning you to your dimension of origin. And if there isn't?" Rogers asked directly. The question hung in the air. Picard glanced at Troy, who gave a subtle nod. Rogers was handling the uncertainty better than most would. The super soldier had already begun accepting his situation, adapting to new variables. Survival instinct honed by war and ice. "Then we would need to consider your status within the Federation," Picard said carefully. "You're a sentient being who arrived through no fault of your own. We have protocols for refugees. For displaced persons. You would have rights, protections, options for integration." "Integration." Rogers tasted the word. "Into what? Exactly?" "Captain Picard, I've been listening to your crew talk, watching how they interact. You've got humans. Klingons." He nodded toward Worf. "Androids. And I'm guessing more species I haven't met yet. You've got technology that makes the Stark Industries weapons I saw look like toys. You travel between stars like I used to take the subway. So before I think about integration, I need to know something." "Ask." Rogers stood, moving to the windows. Earth hung in the distance, a blue-green jewel against the darkness. His reflection ghosted against the glass, a man out of time, looking at a home that wasn't his anymore. "What happened to Earth? After my time, I mean. Did we make it? Did humanity survive? Or did we blow ourselves up like everyone was afraid we would?" Riker and Picard exchanged glances. The question was reasonable, even inevitable. But the answer was complicated. World War III occurred in the mid-21st century, Picard said quietly. 600 million people died. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, societal collapse. By 2063, Earth was a devastated wasteland. Divided into factions. Fighting over scraps. Rogers closed his eyes. "We failed." "No." Picard's voice was firm. "Humanity survived. In 2063, A man named Zephram Cochrane achieved faster than light travel for the first time. His warp flight attracted the attention of the Vulcans, an alien species who had been observing Earth for years. They made first contact, and from that moment, everything changed. Data stepped closer to Rogers, his tone carrying something almost like enthusiasm. First contact united humanity in ways centuries of conflict could not. When faced with proof that we were not alone in the universe, petty nationalism became irrelevant. Within a century, Earth had achieved global unity, eliminated poverty and disease, and joined the United Federation of Planets, an alliance of over 150 worlds, all committed to peaceful exploration and mutual cooperation. You're telling me we built utopia? Rogers sounded skeptical. We're telling you humanity finally grew up, Riker said. It took hitting rock bottom, nearly destroying ourselves, to realize we had to change. The Federation isn't perfect, we still have conflicts. Still make mistakes, but we've moved beyond wars of conquest. Beyond nation-states fighting over resources. We explore. We learn. We try to make the galaxy better. Rogers turned from the window, his expression unreadable. And how do you do that? Make things better? Through the Prime Directive, Picard said. Our fundamental principle of non-interference. We do not interfere with the natural development of pre-warp civilizations. We do not impose our values, our government, our technology on others. We observe, we protect when necessary. But we do not interfere. Something flickered in Rogers' eyes. You don't interfere. Even if people are suffering? Even if you could help? Especially then, Picard said. The right to self-determination is paramount. History has shown that interference, no matter how well-intentioned, often causes more harm than good. We've learned that lesson at great cost. I see. Rogers' voice was neutral, but Troy shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Captain Picard, she said carefully, I'm sensing conflict. Captain Rogers disagrees with our approach. Rogers didn't deny it. In my time, we had a saying. When you see a situation going south, you can't ignore it. Sometimes the best we can do is to start over. I didn't become a soldier to watch from the sidelines while people suffered. I became a soldier to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. He met Picard's gaze. Your Prime Directive sounds like a fancy way of saying not our problem. Worf growled softly. It is not cowardice. It is respect. Is it? Rogers challenged. Or is it an excuse to avoid hard choices? The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Riker leaned back in his chair, recognizing the signs of philosophical collision. This wasn't a debate that would be settled in one conversation. Picard, however, remained composed. Captain Rogers, the Prime Directive has prevented countless tragedies. Without it, the Federation would be no different from the conquerors and empire builders we've encountered. We would impose our will on others, convinced of our superiority, destroying cultures in the name of saving them. And when those cultures are already being destroyed? Rogers asked. When another empire is doing the conquering? The killing? Do you still stand by and watch? We assess each situation according to its specific circumstances, Picard said. Context matters. But yes, there are times when we must watch and do nothing, even when every instinct tells us to act. That restraint is what separates us from tyrants. Rogers was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less certain. Captain Picard, I respect what you're trying to do. I do. But in my experience, there's a difference between restraint and inaction, between wisdom and paralysis. I've seen what happens when good people decide something isn't their problem. He picked up his shield. I won't claim to understand your universe yet. But I know who I am. And I know that some things are worth fighting for, regardless of what the rules say. Picard studied the super soldier, seeing in him echoes of Earth's turbulent past, a time when moral clarity seemed simpler. When right and wrong weren't separated by layers of diplomacy and cultural relativism. It was refreshing, in a way. And deeply concerning. Then I suspect, Captain Rogers, that your time with us will be educational. For all of us. The door chimed. Worf tapped his comm badge. Enter. A young ensign appeared. Slightly out of breath. Captain Picard. Sir. We're receiving a priority transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Nechayev wants a full report on the dimensional anomaly and the visitor. The ensign glanced nervously at Rogers. She's requesting we hold position and await further orders. Picard sighed internally. Admiral Alina Nechayev was thorough, intelligent, and fundamentally distrustful of anything that didn't fit neatly into Starfleet regulations. A super soldier from another dimension definitely didn't fit. Acknowledge the transmission. Tell the Admiral I'll be in contact within the hour. The ensign left. Rogers watched the exchange with the tactical awareness of someone who'd spent years navigating military bureaucracy. Let me guess, he said. Your superiors want to know if I'm a threat. Among other things, Picard admitted. You represent something unprecedented, Captain. An unknown variable with enhanced capabilities and, as you've made clear, a willingness to act according to your own moral code rather than established protocols. So what happens now? Do I get locked up? Studied? Shipped off to some lab? No. Picard's voice was firm. You're a guest on this vessel until we determine otherwise. You'll have quarters, access to our recreational facilities, and the freedom to move about the ship within reason. Lieutenant Worf will assign a security detail, but they're for your protection as much as ours. Rogers smiled slightly. You mean they're there to make sure I don't start trouble? That too, Riker said with a grin. Picard stood, signaling the meeting's end. Data. Work with engineering to analyze Captain Rogers' shield and any residual energy signatures from the rupture. Dr. Crusher, continue your medical scans with the captain's permission. Commander Riker, prepare a detailed report for Admiral Nechayev. And Counselor Troy, I'd appreciate your continued insights on our guest's emotional state. Understood, they chorused. Rogers moved toward the door, then paused. Captain Picard? Thank you. For not treating me like a threat. For giving me a chance. You're welcome, Captain Rogers. But understand you've entered a galaxy far more complex than the one you left. The battles here aren't always fought with shields and strength. Sometimes the greatest conflicts are fought with words, ideas, and the courage to restrain one's power rather than unleash it. Rogers considered this. Then I guess I've got a lot to learn. But fair warning, Captain, I'm still going to do what I think is right. Whatever century I'm in, I would expect nothing less, Picard said. Though I suspect your definition of right and the Federation's may not always align. Probably not. Rogers adjusted his shield. But that's never stopped me before. He left with Worf, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. When they were gone, Troy turned to Picard. He means every word, Captain. He will do what he believes is right, regardless of consequences. That kind of conviction is admirable. It's also dangerous. Picard moved to the windows, watching the stars. Indeed. Counselor, Captain America represents everything the Federation was built to move beyond unilateral action, moral absolutism, the belief that might makes right when wielded by the righteous. He paused. And yet I find myself envious of his certainty. The galaxy has become so complicated that sometimes I wonder if we've lost something essential in our pursuit of complexity. What do you mean? Riker asked. I mean that perhaps we need someone to remind us that some principles are worth defending, even at great cost. That restraint and wisdom are virtues, but so are courage and conviction. Picard turned from the window. Captain Rogers will challenge us. And perhaps. Number 1. That's exactly what we need. In the quarters below, Steve Rogers walked beside Worf, absorbing the sights of a future he'd never imagined. Crew members passed humans, aliens, beings of pure energy contained in environmental suits. Each nodded respectfully, curious but not afraid. It was a strange new world. But Steve Rogers had learned long ago that the world was always strange, always new. What mattered wasn't where you were, but who you chose to be. And he'd made that choice a long time ago. In a dirty Brooklyn alley. When a scrawny kid decided to stand up to bullies. Some things, he thought, never changed. No matter what century you were in. The quarters assigned to Steve Rogers were more spacious than any barracks he'd ever occupied. Soft lighting, replicated furniture that adjusted to his body, a viewport showing the warp-stretched stars, all of it felt surreal. He'd stood at the window for 20 minutes. Shield leaning against the wall, trying to process the fact that he was traveling faster than light through a galaxy humanity had barely begun exploring in his time. A door chime interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called, turning from the window. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing Lieutenant Worf flanked by 2 security officers. The Klingon's expression was stern, professional, but Steve detected something else beneath the surface: respect, maybe, or curiosity. Captain Rogers, Worf said formally. I am here to escort you to your scheduled meeting with Starfleet Command via subspace transmission. Captain Picard has requested your presence. Steve grabbed his shield, securing it to his back. Lead the way, Lieutenant. They walked through the Enterprise's corridors, and Steve found himself studying the crew. They moved with purpose, but without the rigid military bearing he'd known. A young ensign laughed at something her colleague said. An alien with blue skin and antennae consulted a handheld device, muttering in a language Steve's brain somehow understood: the universal translator. Data had explained earlier. This wasn't an army. It was something else entirely. Lieutenant, Steve said as they entered a turbolift. Can I ask you something? Worf's posture stiffened slightly. You may ask. You're Klingon, right? Not human? Correct. I was raised by humans after my parents were killed in a Romulan attack, but I am Klingon by blood and heritage. And Klingons are warriors. I could tell that the moment I saw you. Worf's expression shifted, pride mixing with caution. Yes. My people value honor, combat prowess, and strength. We are a warrior race. Here. So how do you fit into all this? Steve gestured around the turbolift. The Federation seems built on diplomacy, non-interference, peaceful exploration. That can't sit easy with a warrior's instincts. For a moment, Worf said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he answered with complete honesty. It is a constant struggle. I believe in the Federation's principles. They gave me a home, a purpose, a way to honor my parents' memory. But yes, there are times when restraint feels like weakness. Times when action seems preferable to deliberation. His dark eyes met Steve's. You understand this conflict? Yeah, Steve said quietly. I do. The turbolift doors opened onto Deck 8. They proceeded to a secure conference room where Picard, Riker, and Data already waited. A large view screen dominated one wall, currently displaying the United Federation of Planets seal. Captain Rogers, Picard said. Admiral Nechayev is joining us momentarily. She'll want to assess you personally before making any decisions about your status. I should warn you, she can be direct. I'm used to military brass, Captain. I'll manage. The view screen flickered, and a woman appeared, middle-aged, sharp-featured, with steel-gray hair and eyes that evaluated everything with tactical precision. Admiral Elena Nechayev radiated authority and suspicion in equal measure. Captain Picard, she said crisply. I've read your preliminary report. Now I'd like to hear from the anomaly himself. Steve stepped forward. Ma'am. Captain Steve Rogers. United States Army. United States. Nechayev repeated. A nation-state that ceased to exist over 2 centuries ago. Captain Picard's report indicates you claim to be from an alternate dimension, enhanced by experimental procedures from the mid-20th century, and arrived via quantum realm traversal. Her expression was skeptical. Forgive my bluntness, Mr. Rogers, but that sounds like science fiction. With respect, Admiral, so does this conversation. I'm talking to a woman 300 years in my future through faster-than-light communication. A week ago. That would have been science fiction too. Nechayev's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Fair point. Dr. Crusher's medical scans confirm your enhanced physiology. Commander Data's analysis suggests the subspace rupture was genuine. So let's assume you're who you claim to be. The question becomes, what do we do with you? I was hoping you could tell me. Steve said. I didn't ask to be here, Admiral. But here I am. I'm willing to cooperate, answer questions, help however I can. What I won't do is be treated like a lab specimen or a security threat without cause. You're a super soldier with enhanced combat abilities from a parallel universe, Nechayev said flatly. That makes you a security concern by definition. Then let me prove otherwise. Give me a chance to show you I'm not a threat. Put me to work. I'm a soldier, I need a mission, a purpose. Sitting in quarters staring at stars isn't going to help either of us. Picard interjected carefully. Admiral, might I suggest that Captain Rogers could serve as a cultural liaison of sorts? His perspective as someone from Earth's past might provide valuable insights, and supervised integration would allow us to monitor his capabilities while respecting his autonomy. Nechayev considered this, her fingers drumming on her desk parsecs away. Captain Picard, your tendency to adopt strays is well documented. I'm not convinced. The transmission crackled with static. Data's console erupted with alerts. Captain, Data said urgently, we are receiving a distress call. Federation colony on Dorvan V is under attack. Picard's expression hardened. On screen, the Admiral's image split, showing a frightened colonist, a human woman with blood streaming down her face. Behind her, explosions lit the darkness. This is Dorvan V Cardassian ships. They came without warning. Please, we need help. They're killing. The transmission cut to static. Dorvan V, Nechayev said grimly. Border colony near the Cardassian DMZ. We've had reports of increased Cardassian aggression in that sector. Captain Picard. You're the closest vessel. Proceed immediately and assess the situation. Understood, Admiral. What are our rules of engagement? Protect Federation citizens. But Captain, tread carefully. We're in delicate negotiations with the Cardassian Union. One wrong move could trigger a wider conflict. Steve had been silent during the exchange. But now he spoke. You're going to help them? Right? That woman. Those colonists, they're under attack. Nechayev's eyes fixed on him. Mr. Rogers. This is a complex diplomatic situation that, with respect, Admiral. It sounded pretty simple. People are dying. You have a ship that can help them. What's complicated about that? The complication, Nechayev said icily, is that Dorvan V is on disputed territory. The colonists were warned about settling there. If we intervene militarily, we risk violating the treaty that's kept an uneasy peace with Cardassia for 3 years. Steve's jaw tightened. So you're going to let them die because they lived in the wrong place? We're going to assess the situation and respond appropriately according to Federation law and diplomatic protocols. While people die. Captain Rogers, Picard said quietly, a warning in his tone. But Steve couldn't let it go. He'd spent too many years fighting, sacrificing, watching good people die because someone somewhere decided they weren't worth the political cost. The woman's face on that transmission. Terrified and bleeding, he'd seen that face before. In France. In Germany. In the frozen wastes where he'd gone into the ice. Different wars. Same desperation. Admiral Nechayev, he said, voice steady but firm, I understand I'm new here. I don't know your laws, your politics, your galaxy, but I know right and wrong. And letting innocent people die while you debate treaties and protocols? That's wrong. That's always been wrong, no matter what century you're in. The conference room fell silent. Worf shifted position slightly, not quite approving, but not disapproving either. Riker's expression was unreadable. Data simply observed, processing. Nechayev's face could have been carved from granite. Mr. Rogers, you've been in this universe for less than a day, and you presume to lecture Starfleet Command on morality? The Prime Directive, our diplomatic protocols, they exist because we've learned painful lessons about intervention. We've seen civilizations destroyed by well-meaning interference. We've triggered wars trying to prevent them. Your simplistic worldview might have worked in your primitive 20th century conflicts, but this is a galaxy of billions of beings with competing interests, ancient grudges, and weapons that can sterilize planets. One wrong move, one moment of self-righteous action, and millions die. And if you do nothing, these colonists die. That's not millions. That's not abstract. That's real people dying right now while we talk. Captain Picard. Nechayev snapped. Control your guest or have him removed. Picard stepped forward. His voice diplomatic but carrying steel. Admiral. With your permission, we will proceed to Dorvan V immediately. We will assess the situation, provide what assistance we can within the bounds of Federation law, and report back. As for Captain Rogers, he glanced at Steve. His perspective, while perhaps overly direct, reflects a moral clarity that may prove valuable. I recommend he remain under my supervision. Nechayev stared at Picard for a long moment. Very well. But Captain, if this situation escalates into a diplomatic incident because you couldn't keep your dimensional refugee in check, it will be your responsibility. Nechayev out. The screen went dark. Picard turned to Steve. And for a moment, the captain's usual diplomatic composure slipped. Captain Rogers. You will not lecture admirals in Starfleet Command. You will not challenge our protocols in official briefings. And you will not make this situation more difficult than it already is. Is that clear? Crystal. Steve said. But Captain, I have to ask, are you really going to help those colonists? Or are we going to show up, assess the situation, and leave because the politics are too complicated? Picard's expression softened slightly. We will do everything in our power to save lives. But unlike your wars, our conflicts aren't black and white. The Cardassians have legitimate grievances. The colonists settled in a region claimed by both powers. There are treaties, agreements, centuries of history that, people are dying right now, Steve interrupted. Everything else is background noise. No, Picard said firmly. Everything else is context that determines whether our actions save lives or cause more death. That woman's desperation is real, but so is the possibility that our intervention starts a war that kills millions. Do you understand the weight of that choice? Steve met his gaze. I understand that sometimes the right thing is hard. That doesn't make it less right. Worf spoke unexpectedly. Captain, if I may, the colonists sent a distress call. Regardless of political complications, we have an obligation to respond. To do otherwise would be dishonorable. Picard looked at his tactical officer, then at Steve, seeing the alliance forming. Two warriors from different worlds, united by instinct that valued action over deliberation. Number 1, Picard said to Riker. Set course for Dorvan V, maximum warp. Yellow alert. Prepare for possible hostile contact with Cardassian forces. Aye. Captain. As the senior officers dispersed to their stations, Steve lingered. Captain Picard, I'm sorry if I overstepped. But I can't apologize for what I said. Those colonists need help. I know. Picard admitted. And part of me agrees with you. But Captain Rogers, the galaxy has moved beyond the kind of heroism you represent. We've learned that sometimes the best course of action is restraint, even when every instinct screams otherwise. And sometimes, Steve said quietly, restraint is just another word for surrender. Picard had no answer for that. They left the conference room together, heading toward the bridge. Throughout the Enterprise, the crew prepared for potential combat. Weapons charged. Shields calibrated. In sickbay, Dr. Crusher prepared emergency medical stations. In engineering, Geordi La Forge monitored the warp core's output, ready to push the engines beyond recommended limits. And in his temporary quarters, later, Steve Rogers cleaned his shield with a cloth from the replicator. His movements automatic after decades of habit. The shield gleamed under the artificial lights, a symbol from another world, another time, but its meaning unchanged. Some things, he thought again, never changed. People needed protection. Evil needed opposition. And whether you fought with arrows and spears or phasers and photon torpedoes, the fundamentals remain the same. He'd fought Nazis. He'd fought Hydra. He'd fought gods and monsters and his own friends when necessary. Now he was in a future where humanity had achieved wonders, where poverty and disease were memories, where people explored the stars with hope instead of fear. But if that woman's terrified face meant anything, some battles were never truly won. They just moved to new battlefields. Steve secured his shield and stood. Somewhere ahead, colonists were dying. And whether the Federation liked it or not, Captain America was going to do something about it. He'd made a promise long ago, in a dirty lab in Brooklyn, to stand up to bullies, no matter where they were, no matter what form they took. 300 years and an entire dimension hadn't changed that promise. And it never would. The Enterprise dropped out of warp at the edge of the Dorvan system. And the view screen revealed devastation. 3 Cardassian Galar-class warships hung in orbit around Dorvan V, their distinctive crescent shapes silhouetted against the planet's atmosphere. Below, fires dotted the surface settlements, burning, lives ending while the Enterprise crew watched from safety. Steve Rogers stood on the bridge beside Picard's command chair, his presence unauthorized but tolerated. Worf had protested initially, but Picard had allowed it with a simple statement: he deserves to see what his convictions cost. Sensors are reading weapons fire on the surface. Data reported from Ops. Cardassian ground forces have deployed in 3 population centers. Casualty estimates are significant. How significant? Picard asked, his voice controlled but strained. Approximately 400 colonists dead or wounded. The attacks began 6 hours ago. Steve's hands clenched. 6 hours. While they'd been debating protocols and politics, 400 people had been fighting and dying alone. Hail the Cardassian vessels, Picard commanded. The view screen shifted, revealing a Cardassian officer, reptilian features, calculating eyes, and the bearing of someone who enjoyed his work too much. Gulavek. According to the display, a name Steve filed away with all the others he'd collected over the years. Names of people who hurt the innocent and called it duty. Captain Picard, Gulavek said smoothly. How convenient of Starfleet to arrive after the situation has been resolved. Gulavek, you are attacking Federation citizens in violation of the treaty. Federation citizens. Evek's laugh was sharp and cruel. These are illegal settlers on Cardassian territory. The treaty clearly states that Dorvan V falls within our sphere of influence. These colonists were warned to evacuate. They refused. What happens next is their responsibility, not ours. The colony was established before the treaty was signed, Riker interjected. They have grandfather rights under Section 7 of the Accord. Section 7 is under dispute, Evek countered. Until the Arbitration Committee rules, we are within our rights to enforce Cardassian sovereignty. I suggest you withdraw, Captain, before this becomes a diplomatic incident. Steve had heard enough. What you're doing down there isn't enforcement. It's murder. Every head on the bridge turned toward him. Gulavek's eyes narrowed. And who is this? The Cardassian demanded. Starfleet is using civilians on the bridge now? I am Captain Steve Rogers, Steve said, stepping closer to the view screen. And I've met men like you before, Gulavek. Men who hide behind laws and treaties while they do terrible things. Men who think authority excuses atrocity. Evek's expression shifted, amusement mixed with disdain. How quaint. Captain Picard, your pet human has spirit. But spirit without power is meaningless. We have 3 warships, you have 1. We have troops on the ground, securing Cardassian territory. You have regulations preventing you from interfering. The situation is resolved. Leave now, and we can all pretend this conversation never happened. Picard's jaw tightened. Steve could see the calculation happening behind those eyes, weighing options, considering consequences, trapped between moral imperative and political reality. Gulavec, Picard said carefully, I am requesting a ceasefire while we evacuate the remaining colonists. You've made your point. There's no need for further bloodshed. There's every need, Evek replied coldly. These colonists defied Cardassian authority. Others must see what happens to those who show such disrespect. Besides, Captain, our ground forces report that the colonists are fighting back, quite vigorously, in fact. That makes them combatants, not civilians. They're defending their homes. Steve burst out. They're resisting lawful authority. Evek corrected. A distinction I'm sure you understand, Captain Rogers. Or perhaps in your primitive culture. Rebellion was celebrated? He leaned forward. Captain Picard. You have 1 hour to leave this system. After that, any Starfleet presence will be considered an act of war. Evek out. The screen went dark. The bridge was silent for 3 seconds. Then Steve turned to Picard. You're not seriously going to leave. Picard stood slowly, his movements controlled, but Steve could see the fury barely contained beneath the surface. Captain Rogers, you will accompany me to the ready room. Now. They entered the small office off the bridge. And the door sealed behind them. Picard moved to his desk. Hands braced on the surface, breathing carefully. Captain Picard, Steve began. Do you understand what you just did? Picard's voice was quiet, dangerous. You engaged in a diplomatic exchange without authorization. You antagonized a hostile commander. You may have just made this situation exponentially worse. That man is slaughtering colonists while hiding behind bureaucracy. Steve shot back. Someone needed to call him what he is. And what is he? In your estimation? A war criminal. Picard's expression flickered something like agreement, quickly suppressed. Perhaps. But he's also a Cardassian gull operating under orders from his government, enforcing what he believes to be legitimate territorial claims. The treaty is ambiguous. Section 7 has been disputed for months. Legally, his position isn't entirely without merit. Legally, Steve repeated, incredulous. Captain, there are 400 people dead or dying down there. You can't tell me the law matters more than that. The law is what prevents 400 deaths from becoming 4 million. Picard's control finally cracked. Do you think I want to stand by while colonists are attacked? Do you think this is easy for me? But if I violate the treaty, if I fire on those Cardassian ships, I start a war. A war that will consume dozens of worlds, kill billions, and make Dorvan V look like a minor tragedy. So we do nothing. We do what we can within the constraints we have. Picard moved to the window, staring at the Cardassian ships. I will contact Starfleet Command. I will push for emergency arbitration. I will attempt to evacuate as many colonists as possible before Evek's deadline expires. What I will not do is sacrifice the greater good for the immediate satisfaction of righteous anger. Steve stepped forward, his voice urgent. Captain, I've fought in wars. Real wars, where cities burned and millions died. I know the cost of conflict, but I also know the cost of inaction. I know what happens when good people decide something isn't their problem, when they look the other way because intervention is complicated. And I have seen entire civilizations destroyed because someone decided they knew better, Picard countered. The Borg assimilate worlds, believing they're bringing perfection. The Dominion conquers, convinced they're bringing order. Every tyrant in history believed their cause justified their actions. What makes you different? Captain Rogers. What makes your moral certainty less dangerous than theirs? The question hung between them like a blade. Steve took a breath, considering. Because I don't claim to have all the answers, Captain. I just know that when someone's hurting people, you stop them if you can. You don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You don't let complexity paralyze you into inaction, even if that action makes things worse. Sometimes you have to trust that doing the right thing will lead to the right outcome, even when you can't see how. Picard studied him for a long moment. That's faith, not strategy. Maybe, Steve admitted. But strategy without faith is just calculation. And I've never met a calculator worth following into battle. Before Picard could respond, the ready room door chimed. Come. Worf entered, his expression grim. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. One of the colonists is requesting to speak with you. He says it's urgent. On screen, the small display on Picard's desk flickered to life, revealing a man in his 40s, face streaked with dirt and blood. Behind him, Steve could see makeshift barricades and frightened families huddled in what looked like a community center. "Captain Picard," the man said, exhaustion evident in every word. "I'm Marcus Trent, Colony Administrator for Dorvan V. We've been fighting the Cardassians for 6 hours. We've lost over 100 people, including my wife." His voice cracked slightly but held. "We heard your ship arrived. Are you here to help us, or are you here to evacuate us and let the Cardassians win?" Picard's expression was pained. "Mr. Trent, the situation is legally complex. The Cardassians claim territorial rights, and the Federation Treaty. I don't care about the treaty." Trent shouted. "We've been here for 5 years. We built homes, schools, farms. We have children here, Captain, children who are hiding in cellars while Cardassian troops hunt them like animals. Now, are you going to help us fight? Or do we die alone?" Steve couldn't stay silent. "Mr. Trent. This is Captain Rogers. How many colonists are still combat capable?" Trent's eyes shifted to Steve, hope flickering. "Maybe 50, 60. Most are farmers, teachers. We're not soldiers. But we're armed, and we're not giving up our homes without a fight." "Good. What's your tactical situation?" "We've fortified 3 locations: the community center, the school, and the grain storage facility. Cardassian ground forces are surrounding each position. They're not rushing us, just tightening the noose. I think they're waiting for us to surrender or starve. Cardassian ground forces operate in units of 12. Worf interjected, leaning into view. "Standard tactics involve surrounding defensive positions and using superior firepower to force capitulation. They will not risk casualties if they can avoid it." "Then they're hoping we'll break," Trent said. "They don't know us very well." Steve felt something stir in his chest. Recognition. He'd seen this before. In France. In Belgium. In 100 battlefields where ordinary people decided they'd rather die standing than live kneeling. "Mr. Trent," Steve said, "if someone could get down there and help coordinate your defense, could you hold out?" "Captain Rogers," Picard warned. But Trent answered immediately. "Yes. If we had someone with military experience, someone who could turn us from a mob into a fighting force we could hold. We could make them pay for every meter." "Then that's what we'll do," Steve said. "Absolutely not," Picard said firmly. "Mr. Trent, we will do everything in our power to evacuate your people, but I cannot authorize military intervention." "You mean you won't?" Trent said bitterly. "The mighty Federation, always ready with words and regulations, never with action when it counts." He looked directly at Steve. "Captain Rogers, whoever you are, if you can help us, please. We're begging you." The transmission ended. The ready room fell into tense silence. Steve turned to Picard. "I'm going down there." "No, you are not. With respect, Captain, I'm not one of your crew. I don't answer to Starfleet. You said yourself I'm a guest. Well, as a guest, I'm choosing to leave your ship and help those colonists." Picard's eyes flashed. "You will do no such thing. You are on my vessel, under my authority. Lieutenant Worf, escort Captain Rogers to his quarters and place a security detail on his door." Worf stepped forward, but his movements were reluctant. "Captain Picard." The colonists face overwhelming odds. If someone with Captain Rogers' abilities were to assist them, many lives could be saved. Lives would also be lost when the Cardassians retaliate. Picard countered. "When they interpret our intervention as an act of war. When this border skirmish becomes a full-scale conflict. Then we make sure it doesn't," Steve said. "We keep this quiet. I go down alone. Help organize the defense, make it costly enough that the Cardassians decide these colonists aren't worth the trouble. No Starfleet involvement, no treaty violations. Just one person acting on his own. You are a guest on a Federation starship," Picard said. "Anything you do reflects on us. Not if you officially order me to stay aboard. Not if I disobey that order and act independently." Steve met his gaze. "Give me the order, Captain. Tell me I'm confined to quarters. Make it official. Then when I break out and beam down anyway, it's on me. Not you. Not the Federation." Picard stared at him, and Steve could see the war happening behind those eyes. Duty versus conscience, regulation versus righteousness, the weight of command crushing down on a good man trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. "You would throw away any chance of returning home," Picard said quietly. "Starfleet would classify you as a hostile entity. You'd be hunted, arrested, possibly imprisoned or worse." "I've been frozen in ice for 70 years and woke up to find everyone I love dead," Steve said. "I've lost homes before, Captain. I can do it again. What I can't do is stand by while people die when I could have helped. This is madness. This is necessary." For a long moment, they stood at an impasse, two captains, two philosophies, two eras of human history colliding in a small office while colonists died below. Then Picard spoke, his voice carrying the weight of command and resignation in equal measure. Captain Steve Rogers, you are hereby ordered to remain in your quarters until further notice. You are not to leave the Enterprise, not to engage in any activities that might compromise this vessel's diplomatic standing, and not to interfere with Starfleet operations in any way. This order is official and logged. Do you understand? I understand perfectly, Captain, Steve said. And I'm going anyway. Lieutenant Worf, escort the prisoner to his quarters. Worf moved to Steve's side, his hand not quite touching his phaser. They walked to the door. And just before it opened, Steve looked back at Picard. For what it's worth, Captain, I think you're a good man caught in a bad system. But sometimes good men have to break bad systems to do what's right. And sometimes, Picard replied softly, breaking systems causes more harm than enduring them. I hope you're right, Captain Rogers. Because if you're wrong, many people will die because of your certainty. The door closed between them. On the bridge, Commander Riker approached Picard's ready room as the captain emerged, his expression unreadable. Sir, I couldn't help but overhear. Are we really confining Captain Rogers to quarters? Picard looked at his first officer, and something passed between them, an understanding, unspoken but clear. Yes. Number 1. We are confining him to quarters. Under heavy guard. Guards who are, of course, only human. Who might be distracted by urgent duties elsewhere if a resourceful super soldier decided to leave. Riker's lips quirked slightly. Of course, sir. Human error. It happens. Indeed it does. Picard said. And if Captain Rogers were to somehow reach a transporter room and beam down to the planet, well, that would be unfortunate, particularly since we'd have no way to stop him without using force. And I would never order my crew to use force against someone who's technically a diplomatic guest. Plausible deniability, Riker said quietly. Exactly. Picard returned to his command chair, the weight of compromise settling on his shoulders. Mr. Data, how long until Gulivek's deadline expires? 52 minutes, Captain. Then we have 52 minutes to prepare for evacuation operations. And if a certain enhanced individual happens to be on the surface assisting colonists during that time, well, Starfleet Command need never know the details. Worf returned to the bridge, his expression carefully neutral. Captain Rogers is secured in his quarters. The guards have been instructed to watch the door carefully. The door? Lieutenant? Yes, sir. The door specifically. Picard allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Carry on. In his quarters, Steve Rogers examined the ceiling panel above his bed. The Enterprise's internal sensors would be monitoring the corridors, but the ship was large, with thousands of access points. He'd infiltrated Hydra bases with worse odds. He secured his shield, checked his uniform still intact despite everything, and prepared to break yet another order in the name of doing what was right. Some things never changed, and Steve Rogers wouldn't want them to. Transporter Room 3 was staffed by a single ensign, young, nervous, and entirely unprepared for a super soldier appearing through a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. Steve dropped silently behind him, moved with practiced efficiency, and before the ensign could reach the comm panel, Steve had gently restrained him. I'm sorry about this, Steve said quietly, lowering the unconscious ensign into a chair. You were just doing your job. He moved to the transporter console, studying the controls. Data had given him a basic overview of Federation technology during their earlier conversation meant as cultural education, but Steve had been memorizing systems, contingencies, tactical options, old habits. The console was more intuitive than he'd expected. He located Dorvan V's coordinates, identified a position outside the Cardassian sensor perimeter based on Data's briefing about their scanning range, and set the transporter for a single-person beam. Computer, he said, hoping this worked, initiate transport on my mark. Authorization. He paused. He didn't have authorization. Emergency medical transport. Civilian requiring immediate evacuation. Acknowledged. Transport sequence ready. Steve stepped onto the pad, shield on his back, and took one last look at the Enterprise's clean, peaceful interior. He was about to violate every principle the Federation held sacred. He was about to start a fight that might trigger a war. But 400 colonists were dead, and more were dying while diplomats debated. Some choices were simple, even when the consequences weren't. Energize. The world dissolved into light. Steve materialized on Dorvan V in a forest clearing, 3 kilometers from the nearest settlement according to his rough calculations. The air was humid, thick with the smell of burning wood and something chemical weapons discharge. Maybe, in the distance, he could hear sporadic weapons fire. He oriented himself quickly, using the smoke columns as landmarks. The community center was northeast, perhaps 2 clicks. He started running, moving through the forest with tactical awareness born from decades of combat experience. Enhanced physiology meant he could maintain this pace indefinitely, one advantage the Cardassians wouldn't anticipate. The forest gave way to agricultural fields, and Steve dropped into a crouch, scanning the terrain. Ahead, he could see Cardassian troops, 12 soldiers in formation, methodically advancing toward a farmhouse. Their armor was utilitarian, their weapons efficient. Professional military. Not thugs. That made them dangerous. Steve circled wide, using a grain silo for cover. The Cardassians were focused on the farmhouse, where someone was firing back with what looked like a hunting rifle, brave but outmatched. The Cardassian commander barked orders in a language Steve's brain translated automatically, thanks to whatever universal translator technology Picard had mentioned. Suppressing fire. Flush them out. Energy weapons discharged. Punching holes through the farmhouse walls. Inside. Someone screamed. Steve made his decision. He burst from cover at full sprint, shield leading. The Cardassian rear guard had exactly 1 second to register movement before Steve slammed into him, shield impacting armor with a sound like a bell tolling. The soldier went down hard. The other 11 spun. Weapons tracking, and Steve was already moving. He threw his shield muscle memory from 1,000 battles and watched it arc through the air, strike 2 soldiers, ricochet off a support beam, and return to his hand as he rolled under return fire. Unknown hostile. The Cardassian commander shouted. Concentrate fire. Energy bolts scorched the ground where Steve had been. He came up behind a transport vehicle, shield absorbing impacts, vibranium ringing with each hit. The shield's unpredictable behavior in this universe became apparent. It absorbed the first 3 phaser strikes perfectly, but the 4th one ricocheted at a wild angle, nearly hitting Steve himself. Different physics. He'd need to adapt. Steve launched over the vehicle, using enhanced strength to clear 3 meters of height. He landed in the middle of the Cardassian formation, shield work precise and brutal. Block. Strike. Turn. Sweep. He wasn't trying to kill, just disable, disarm, neutralize. A Cardassian swung a rifle butt at his head. Steve ducked, drove his shield's edge into the soldier's knee, non-lethal but incapacitating, and spun to block another attack. His fighting style was a blend of boxing, military combatives, and hard-earned experience. Every movement efficient, economical, devastating. Within 30 seconds, 8 Cardassians were down. The remaining 4 backed away. Weapons raised. Recognition dawning that they faced something beyond normal human capability. What are you? The commander demanded. Someone who doesn't like bullies, Steve replied. Stand down, you've lost this position. The commander's jaw ridges tightened. You're Federation. Starfleet operative? I'm acting independently. This doesn't involve the Enterprise or Starfleet command. They'll say anything to maintain plausible deniability. But when word reaches Gulevek, tell him an independent combatant is on the surface helping the colonists. Tell him that if he wants this planet, he'll have to fight for every centimeter. And tell him some of us don't hide behind treaties when people need help. The commander's finger moved toward his comm device. Steve threw his shield a calculated risk and it struck the device, shattering it, then ricocheted back. The commander staggered, reaching for his backup communicator. Steve crossed the distance in 2 bounds and applied a precise nerve strike Natasha Romanoff had taught him years ago or centuries in the future, depending on how you counted. The commander collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. The farmhouse door opened slowly, and an elderly man emerged, hunting rifle still clutched in shaking hands. His eyes were wide with shock. You're from the Enterprise? In a manner of speaking, Steve said, recovering his breath. Are you injured? My daughter, they shot her. She's inside. Bleeding. Steve was moving before the man finished speaking. Inside the farmhouse, a woman in her 30s lay on the floor, blood pooling from a shoulder wound. Steve knelt beside her. His World War II field medic training kicking in despite the centuries between then and now. Pressure on the wound. He instructed the elderly man. Keep her talking. I need to find the settlement's medical facility. Community center, the woman gasped. Marcus Trent, administrator, coordinating defense from there. Then that's where I'm going. Stay down, stay quiet. The Cardassians will regroup, but you've got maybe 30 minutes before they send reinforcements. Steve left the farmhouse at a run, moving through fields and forest with enhanced speed. The community center appeared ahead, a low building surrounded by makeshift barricades. Colonists with hunting rifles and improvised weapons crouched behind cover, watching Cardassian positions in the distance. A young woman spotted Steve first, her weapon tracking him before she recognized the shield. Hold fire. I don't know what he is. But he's not Cardassian. Steve vaulted the barricade, landing in a crouch. Immediately, 3 rifles pointed at him, then lowered as a familiar face pushed through the crowd. Marcus Trent looked worse than he had on the transmission, exhausted, grieving, but still standing. When he saw Steve, something like hope flickered in his eyes. "You came." "I came. Captain Rogers. As promised." "Where do you need me?" Trent gestured toward the community center. Inside, Steve found a command post that was equal parts refugee shelter and war room. Families huddled in corners. Maps covered tables. Colonists with minor wounds received treatment from people who were clearly teachers or farmers, not doctors. "We've got 3 defensive positions," Trent explained, pointing at a hand-drawn map. "This center, the school 2 kilometers east, and the grain facility to the south. Maybe 200 colonists total, spread across all 3. The Cardassians have us surrounded, but they're not pressing hard. I think they're waiting for orders. They're waiting to see if the Enterprise leaves," Steve said. "Once Starfleet withdraws, they'll move in for the kill." "How many fighters do you have?" "Way. 60, maybe 70. Most have never fired a weapon in anger. We're farmers, Captain, teachers, engineers. We came here to build something, not fight a war. Sometimes war finds you anyway," Steve said quietly. "But that's okay. You don't need to be professional soldiers. You just need to be brave enough to stand your ground. And from what I've seen, you've got courage in spades." A younger man, maybe 25, stepped forward. "Are you really from the Enterprise? Is Starfleet going to help us?" Steve met his gaze honestly. "No. Starfleet can't get involved without triggering a major diplomatic incident. I'm here independently, without official sanction. If we win, it's because we fought smart and held together. If we lose," he let the implication hang, "then we lose alone," an older woman said bitterly. "Just like we've been fighting alone for 6 hours." "Not alone," Steve corrected. "Not anymore. Now you've got someone who's done this before, someone who's faced worse odds and won." He moved to the map, studying the tactical situation with trained eyes. "The Cardassians have numbers and firepower, but they're not expecting organized resistance. They think you're rabble. We're going to show them different." "How?" Trent asked. Steve's finger traced positions on the map. "First, we consolidate. 3 defensive positions are too spread out, we can't support each other. We fall back to this center, fortify it properly, and make it a fortress. Second, we establish clear sight lines, overlapping fields of fire, and fallback positions. Third, we hit them when they don't expect it. Make them cautious. Make them bleed for every advance." "You want us to counterattack?" The young man sounded incredulous. "We're barely holding what we have." "Which is exactly why they won't expect it," Steve said. Lieutenant Worf on the Enterprise explained Cardassian tactics: they avoid casualties when possible, prefer overwhelming force to tactical risk. If we bloody their nose once or twice, they might decide this settlement isn't worth the cost. Trent studied the map, then Steve. "You really think we can win?" "I think you can survive," Steve corrected. "And sometimes survival is victory enough. But I need total authority over defensive operations. No debates, no second guessing. I've fought wars in 2 different centuries, and I know how to keep people alive when the odds are bad. Do you trust me?" Trent looked around at his colonists, tired, scared, but not broken. Then back at Steve. "We trust you. What do we do first?" "First, we evacuate the school and grain facility. Everyone falls back here within 30 minutes. Bring weapons, medical supplies, and food. Leave everything else. Second, I need your best shots, people who can actually hit targets under stress. Third, I need someone who knows the Cardassian language and their comm frequencies. And fourth," Steve pulled out a communicator he'd borrowed from the unconscious ensign. "I need to send a message to the Enterprise. I thought Starfleet wasn't helping. They're not. But Captain Picard needs to know what I'm doing, even if he can't officially acknowledge it. And we might need an emergency extraction if things go completely sideways." Steve activated the communicator, adjusting the frequency. "Enterprise, this is Rogers. I'm on the surface, coordinating colonial defense. No Starfleet involvement required. But if you see an opportunity to evacuate civilians during the confusion, I'd appreciate it." Rogers out. He didn't wait for a response. Either Picard would help or he wouldn't. Either way, Steve had work to do. For the next 30 minutes, the community center transformed. Colonists from the outlying positions arrived in groups, carrying wounded and supplies. Steve organized them with military precision fighters to the perimeter, non-combatants to the reinforced interior rooms, medical personnel setting up a proper triage area. A woman named Sarah, former military engineer before she became a farmer, helped Steve assess the building's defensive capabilities. We've got duranium support beams, which will resist phaser fire. Windows are standard transparent aluminum, decent protection. The main weakness is the north wall, older construction, more vulnerable. Then we reinforce it with whatever we have. Furniture, equipment, sandbags if you've got them. And we establish a fallback position inside the building in case they breach. Steve moved through the colonists, assessing capabilities, building confidence with his presence. These weren't soldiers, but they had something professional military sometimes lack: desperate determination to protect their homes and families. A teenage girl approached, barely 16, carrying a hunting rifle. "Sir, I can shoot. My dad taught me. I want to help." Steve studied her, young, scared, but resolved. He'd seen that look before. In children during the war who'd lost everything and refused to surrender. "What's your name?" "Emma." "Emma, I need you on the east barricade. You'll be with Marcus and 2 other shooters. Your job is to make any Cardassian who shows himself regret it. Can you do that?" She nodded. Jaw set. "Yes. Sir." "Good. Remember, aim for center mass, breathe before you shoot, and if things get hot, fall back to the secondary position. Survival first. Heroics never." As Emma moved to her position, Trent appeared at Steve's side. "She's 15. Her parents died in the first attack. She's all alone now. Then we make sure she stays alive," Steve said quietly. "All of them. That's the mission." A colonist monitoring Cardassian comm frequencies called out urgently. "Captain Rogers. The Cardassians are broadcasting. WWII-era just issued new orders. They're moving 3 more ground units to our position. He says the Enterprise has 30 minutes to withdraw or face consequences." Steve checked the chronometer. Picard's deadline from evac was almost up. The Cardassians would be pushing soon, testing the defenses, probing for weakness. "Everyone to positions," Steve commanded. His voice carrying authority earned through leadership, not rank. "Check your weapons. Confirm your sight lines. And remember, we're not trying to win a war. We're trying to make attacking us more trouble than it's worth. Hold your fire until I give the command. Discipline wins battles." The colonists moved to their stations, fear transforming into purpose. Steve climbed to the roof of the community center, shield on his back, surveying the battlefield. In the distance, Cardassian forces were massing more troops than before, better organized, ready for a proper assault. They'd stopped playing cautious. Now they were coming with intent to overwhelm. Steve's enhanced vision picked out details: unit compositions, weapon placements, command structure. He'd fought outnumbered before. He'd held lines that should have broken. He'd led people who had every reason to surrender but chose to fight instead. This was familiar ground. Below, Marcus Trent looked up at him. "What do we do if they overrun us?" Steve met his gaze steadily. "We make them remember that free people don't break easy. And we trust that sometimes, doing the right thing is enough." In orbit above, Captain Picard watched sensor readings of Cardassian troop movements. Beside him, Riker spoke quietly. "Sir, sensors indicate Captain Rogers is on the surface, coordinating defensive positions. He's consolidated the colonists into a single fortified location." "Of course he has," Picard murmured. "Mr. Data, can we evacuate civilians without engaging the Cardassians directly?" "Negative, Captain. Cardassian forces are positioned too close to population centers. Any transport attempt would be detected and interpreted as military intervention." Picard's hands gripped his chair. Every regulation, every protocol told him to withdraw, but every instinct, every principle he'd built his life upon, screamed to help. "Captain," Worf said suddenly, "WWII-era is hailing us." On screen, the Cardassian appeared, satisfaction evident in his reptilian features. "Captain Picard, I believe your deadline has expired. Withdraw immediately, or we will consider your presence an act of war." WWII-era. There are civilians. There are illegal settlers resisting lawful authority. And now, it seems, they have outside assistance, a human with enhanced capabilities who claims to be acting independently. How convenient. This is exactly the kind of plausible deniability Starfleet loves. Captain Rogers is not operating under Starfleet authority. "Then stop him," Ivek interrupted. "Use your transporter to remove him from the surface. Unless, of course, you can't. Unless he's there with your tacit approval, making you complicit in his actions." Picard's jaw tightened. The trap was sprung. If he beamed Rogers off the planet, he'd be admitting Starfleet control. If he didn't, he'd be admitting Rogers acted with Starfleet blessing. Either way, the Cardassians had their excuse. WWII-era. I will not be manipulated. Then watch, Captain. Watch as we teach these colonists and their Federation protector what happens when you defy Cardassian sovereignty. Evac out. The screen went dark. On Dorvan V. Steve Rogers stood on the community center roof, watching the Cardassian forces advance. This was it. The moment when talk ended and action began. The moment when principles were tested against reality. He'd been here before. Different enemies. Same fundamental choice. Stand or flee. Fight or surrender. Accept injustice or oppose it, regardless of cost. Steve Rogers had made that choice in a Brooklyn alley when he was 90 pounds soaking wet. He'd made it again in the ice, sacrificing himself to save millions. He made it now, on an alien world, 300 years in his future, surrounded by people he'd just met who needed someone to believe in. The Cardassians were 200 meters away and closing. Steve raised his shield. Hold the line. He called down to the colonists. Hold the line. And we win. Below, 60 farmers and teachers and engineers gripped their weapons and prepared to defend their homes. Because sometimes, Steve Rogers thought, the simplest truths are the most important ones. Freedom is worth fighting for. Tyranny must be opposed. And when someone needs help, you help them. No matter what century you're in. The Cardassian assault began with precision suppressing fire from 3 directions, forcing the colonists to keep their heads down while shock troops advanced in coordinated formations. Steve watched from the rooftop, shield deflecting sporadic fire, his tactical mind cataloging their approach vectors, identifying their squad leaders, finding the patterns. Emma. East barricade 3 targets moving through the irrigation ditch. Wait for my mark. The teenage girl's voice came back steady despite the chaos. Targets acquired. Fire. Her rifle cracked once, twice. A Cardassian soldier stumbled, armor smoking where the energy bolt struck. The others dove for cover, their advance stalled. Good shooting. Suppress that position. Don't let them regroup. Steve moved across the rooftop, his enhanced vision tracking multiple threats simultaneously. The Cardassians were professional. They adapted quickly, using cover effectively, coordinating fire to pin defenders while others advanced. But they were also cautious, still not committing fully. They expected colonists to break under sustained pressure. They didn't know about Steve Rogers yet. Not really. A Cardassian squad pushed hard on the southern approach, using a disabled hover transport for mobile cover. Steve marked their trajectory. They'd reached the barricade within 30 seconds, and the colonists holding that position were already falling back under sustained fire. Sarah? South wall falling back? We can't hold. The former engineer shouted over the comm. They've got us pinned, and we're running low on. Hold your position 5 more seconds. I'm coming to you. Steve ran across the rooftop, gathered speed, and launched himself off the edge. He fell 2 stories. Shield angled down to absorb impact, and landed in the middle of the Cardassian squad with earth-shaking force. The vibranium shield discharged energy unpredictably, the impact creating a shockwave that knocked 3 soldiers off their feet. Different physics meant different results, but Steve adapted instantly. He rolled. Came up striking. Shield work precise and devastating. A Cardassian commander swung a rifle at his head. Steve blocked with the shield, the vibranium ringing like a bell, then delivered a combat kick that sent the commander sprawling. Another soldier tried to shoot at point-blank range. Steve deflected the phaser bolt with his shield, watched it ricochet wildly into the sky, and struck the soldier's weapon hand hard enough to disarm without breaking bones. Non-lethal when possible, Steve reminded himself, even as combat instincts screamed for efficiency. These were soldiers following orders, not monsters. There was a difference. Within 15 seconds, the squad was disabled, unconscious, disarmed, or retreating. Steve grabbed the hover transport they'd been using for cover and, with enhanced strength, flipped it onto its side, creating a new defensive barrier. Sarah, reinforce this position. Use the transport for cover. The colonists surged forward, emboldened by Steve's intervention. Sarah organized them quickly, establishing overlapping fields of fire behind the new barrier. The Cardassian advance on the south wall stalled completely. Steve's communicator crackled. Marcus Trent's voice urgent. Rogers. North wall. They're bringing up heavy weapons, some kind of plasma cannon. If that thing fires. I see it. The plasma cannon was being positioned 300 meters out, a crew of 6 Cardassians assembling it with practiced efficiency. Steve recognized the design from Data's briefing on Cardassian military equipment, a Type 3 assault cannon, capable of punching through reinforced structures. One shot would breach the community center's north wall. Steve calculated angles, distances, probabilities. 300 meters. 6 armed soldiers. Heavy weapon that would devastate the colonists' defensive position if allowed to fire. He made his decision. Emma. Marcus, hold the line. I'm going out. Out? Trent's voice cracked with disbelief. Rogers. That's suicide. That's my job. Steve vaulted the barricade and sprinted into open ground. The Cardassians saw him immediately. Energy weapons tracked his movement, bolts scoring the earth around him as he ran in an unpredictable pattern, zigzagging, rolling, using every scrap of cover available. His enhanced speed and reflexes turned him into a difficult target, but several shots found their mark. His uniform's material, whatever advanced fabric it was made from, absorbed some impacts. His shield caught others. But one bolt grazed his shoulder, burning through cloth and searing skin. Steve ignored the pain, maintained his sprint, and covered the 300 meters in less than 30 seconds. The plasma cannon crew realized too late what was happening. Their commander barked orders, trying to swing the weapon toward this impossible human charging their position. But Steve was already there. He hit the cannon crew like a hurricane. Shield strike to disable the gunner. Roll under return fire. Sweep kick to take out 2 soldiers. Block. Deflect. Counter. His fighting style was beautiful in its efficiency, no wasted movement, every action serving multiple purposes. Within seconds, 4 soldiers were down. The commander pulled a sidearm, aiming directly at Steve's head from 2 meters away. No time to block. No angle to dodge. Steve threw his shield. The vibranium disc struck the commander's weapon, sent it flying, ricocheted off the plasma cannon's support frame, and returned to Steve's hand as he'd known it would. Muscle memory from 1,000 battles, physics be damned. The last soldier charged with a combat knife hand to hand, desperate. Steve respected that. He blocked the knife thrust, applied a joint lock Natasha had taught him, and gently lowered the soldier to the ground unconscious. The plasma cannon sat unattended, its power core glowing ominously. Steve examined it quickly. Unfamiliar technology, but the principles were clear enough. Destroy the power core. Neutralize the threat. He raised his shield to strike. Captain Rogers, do not destroy that weapon. Steve froze. The voice came from his borrowed communicator, but it wasn't Trent or any of the colonists. It was Captain Picard. Captain Picard. Steve kept his shield raised, wary. I'm kind of busy here. I'm aware. Sensors show you've neutralized the cannon crew. But if you destroy that weapon, the Cardassians will claim you're using advanced Federation technology. The cannon's power core signature will register as sabotage by Starfleet equipment. It will give WWII-era exactly the excuse he needs to escalate. Steve's jaw tightened. Even now. Even in the middle of battle. Politics mattered. So what do you suggest? I leave it operational? Disable it in a way that appears mechanical failure. There's a safety interlock on the left side panel. Remove it manually. The weapon will register as non-functional due to crew error, not sabotage. Steve found the panel, pried it open with enhanced strength, and yanked out the interlock mechanism. The cannon's power core dimmed, flickering out. Done. Now can I get back to keeping these people alive? Captain Rogers. Picard's voice carried something Steve hadn't heard before. Respect mixed with concern. What you're doing down there, the defense you've organized, it's remarkable. But WWII-era is requesting additional reinforcements. 3 more warships are en route. Within the hour, the Cardassians will have enough ground forces to overwhelm your position regardless of how well you fight. Then we fight for an hour and see what happens. There is another option. Picard paused. I have been in contact with Starfleet Command. Admiral Nechayev has authorized emergency civilian evacuation during active combat situations, a loophole in the treaty. If the colonists are willing to abandon their settlement, we can beam them aboard during the confusion of battle. They'll lose their homes, but they'll live. Steve looked back at the community center, where colonists fought desperately to protect what they'd built. Homes. Schools. Lives they'd carved from wilderness. He thought of Marcus Trent, who'd lost his wife defending this place. Of Emma, 15 years old and orphaned, fighting because she had nowhere else to go. Of Sarah and dozens of others who'd chosen this world as their future. Have you asked them? Steve said quietly. Whether they want to evacuate? Mr. Trent indicated they want to fight. But Captain Rogers, wanting something doesn't make it possible. Sometimes survival means accepting loss. And sometimes, Steve replied, survival means deciding what you're willing to die for. He closed the channel and started running back toward the community center. Behind him, the disabled plasma cannon sat silent, the Cardassian crew beginning to stir. He'd kept his promise non-lethal when possible. But more would come. More weapons, more soldiers, more pressure until something broke. Steve reached the barricades and vaulted inside. The colonists cheered when they saw him, a ragged sound of hope mixed with exhaustion. They'd held through the first major assault, but everyone could see the truth in the distance. More Cardassian forces massing, regrouping. preparing for the next wave. Marcus Trent met him at the command post, his face haggard. Picard contacted us. He says we can evacuate. Get everyone off planet before the Cardassians overrun us. What did you tell him? I told him I'd ask the colonists. Put it to a vote. Trent looked around at the defenders, farmers covered in dust, teachers clutching weapons they'd never wanted to fire, engineers turned soldiers through necessity. But I already know what they'll say. They'll vote to stay. Every single one. Trent's voice was raw with emotion. We came here to build something, Rogers. We left Earth, traveled light years, carved farms and homes from nothing. We buried family here. Had children here. This is our home. And the Federation wants us to just abandon it? Let the Cardassians win because fighting back is too politically complicated? Steve understood. He'd fought for Brooklyn once, for a city that barely knew his name. He'd fought for America, for allies, for strangers. He'd fought for principles that sometimes seemed naive but never stopped being true. What do you want to do, Marcus? Trent met his gaze. I want to fight. I want every Cardassian who comes here to know they're not welcome. I want to make this settlement so costly to take that Gulivek decides it's not worth the trouble. And if we die trying, his voice cracked slightly. At least we die as free people defending our home. Steve nodded slowly. Then we fight. But we fight smart. No heroics. No last stands. We make them bleed. We make them cautious. And we hope that's enough. Is it ever enough? Sometimes, Steve said. Sometimes standing your ground is victory enough. Even if you lose the battle. Future generations remember who fought. Who stood up when standing up was hard. They remember that freedom mattered more than safety. A young colonist, one of Sarah's engineering crew, approached hesitantly. Captain Rogers. I have an idea. It's probably crazy, but right now, I'll take crazy. What have you got? The young man, his name was David, pulled out a schematic. We've got industrial equipment in the storage facility south of here. Mining charges, used for clearing rock. If we could rig them as proximity mines along the Cardassian approach routes. Booby traps, Steve said, studying the schematic. It's against Federation conventions, but we're not Federation military. We're civilians defending our homes. Different rules apply. He looked at Sarah. Can you make it work? Give me 10 minutes and 3 volunteers. We'll turn their advance routes into a nightmare. Do it. And Sarah, be careful. Anything that goes boom has a tendency to do it at inconvenient times. She grinned, a flash of defiance in the face of impossible odds. That's the idea. While Sarah organized her demolition team, Steve climbed back to the rooftop, surveying the battlefield. The Cardassians had pulled back to regroup, giving the colonists a brief respite. But in the distance, he could see reinforcements arriving, more troops, more weapons, more inevitability. His shoulder burned where the phaser bolt had grazed him, but enhanced healing was already knitting damaged tissue. He'd fought through worse. The question wasn't whether he could keep fighting, it was whether fighting would be enough. His communicator crackled again. This time, it was a voice he didn't recognize, harsh, commanding, speaking through universal translation. Human. The one with the shield. I am Gulivek. I'm told you're responsible for organizing this resistance. Steve activated the comm. That's right. You want to discuss surrender terms? Ivek laughed, a sound without humor. Your courage is admirable. Foolish, but admirable. I'm offering you a chance, human. Leave now. Use your Federation transporter. Return to the Enterprise. And we'll consider this matter closed. You're not a colonist. This isn't your fight. There's no reason for you to die here. There's every reason, Steve replied. These people asked for help. I gave it. I don't walk away when things get hard. The second thing. Then you'll die with them. My reinforcements arrive in 43 minutes. I have 150 ground troops, orbital fire support if needed, and every advantage. You have what? 60 farmers with hunting rifles? A collection of improvised defenses? One super soldier, remarkable though you are, cannot change those odds. Watch me. I've reviewed your combat footage. Ivek continued. Your abilities are impressive. Enhanced strength, speed, reflexes. Clearly you're a product of genetic or technological modification. In Cardassian space, such individuals are highly valued. Work for us. Help us bring order to this chaotic region. You'd be compensated generously, given rank and authority. Why die for people who mean nothing to you? Steve thought about that question. Why fight for strangers? Why risk everything for colonists he'd known for less than 2 hours? The answer was simple. Because someone has to, Steve said. Because if good people don't stand up to bullies, bullies win. Because these colonists have every right to defend their homes, and I have the ability to help them do it. That makes it my responsibility. Responsibility. Yvette savored the word. How quaint. Captain Rogers. I almost regret what's about to happen. You remind me of warriors I once respected before I learned that principles are luxuries the weak cannot afford. Yvette out. The comm went silent. Below, Sarah returned with her team, explosives rigged and positioned along 3 approach vectors. Mining charges are set. Proximity triggers, just like you asked. First wave that pushes hard is going to get a nasty surprise. Good work. Now get everyone back inside the center. Rest while you can. Drink water. Check weapons. Treat injuries. We've got maybe 30 minutes before they come again. The colonists moved with practiced efficiency, now still frightened, still exhausted, but no longer scattered. They'd become something approaching a unit. Bound together by shared purpose and desperate necessity. Steve found Emma on the east barricade, staring at her rifle. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline crash after sustained combat. You did good out there, Steve said quietly, sitting beside her. Your shooting kept them off balance. Saved lives. I killed someone. Her voice was small, breaking. I saw him go down after I fired, and I kept shooting because you told me to, but I killed someone. Steve had been here before a young soldier's first kill, the moment when warfare stopped being abstract and became horrifyingly real. He'd seen it in World War II, seen it in every conflict since. There were no good words for this moment. But there were true ones. Yeah. You did. And that's something you'll carry forever. But Emma, listen to me, you didn't start this fight. The Cardassians attacked your home, you defended it. That doesn't make it easy. Doesn't make the nightmares go away. But it does make it necessary. Does it get easier? No. Steve said honestly. If it got easier, that would mean you'd lost something important. You hold on to that feeling, that horror at taking a life. It's what keeps you human when everything around you is trying to turn you into something else. She wiped tears from her face, jaw setting with determination. I won't let them take my home. Whatever it costs. That's the spirit. But Emma's survival comes first. If things get bad, if I give the order to fall back, you run. You hear me? You run and you live. Because living means the Cardassians didn't win everything. She nodded, and Steve moved on. Checking other positions. Offering encouragement and tactical advice. These weren't his troops, he had no official authority. No chain of command. But leadership wasn't about rank. It was about showing up when things were hard and making people believe they could do the impossible. Marcus Trent found him as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and reds that would have been beautiful if not for the smoke columns staining the air. Rogers, I need to tell you something. Before this goes any further. Go ahead. If we die here, when we die here, I want you to know it wasn't for nothing. You gave us hope. You showed us we could fight back, that we didn't have to just accept whatever the galaxy threw at us. That matters. Whatever happens next. That matters. Steve looked at this man, administrator turned warrior, husband turned widower, colonist turned soldier, and saw echoes of everyone he'd ever fought beside. Different faces, same courage. We're not dead yet, Marcus. And I've seen people survive worse odds. Sometimes the universe rewards the stubborn. And sometimes it crushes them. Then we get crushed standing up. There are worse ways to go. Trent laughed, a genuine sound despite everything. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the craziest. Can it be both? The moment of levity broke as sensors began shrieking alerts. On the horizon, Cardassian forces were moving, not probing attacks this time, but a full coordinated assault. 150 troops in disciplined formations, supported by heavy weapons and tactical air cover. This was it. The final push. Win or die. Steve activated the general comm channel. All positions, this is Rogers. They're coming with everything. Hold your fire until they hit the mining charges. Then make every shot count. If we break their momentum now, we win. If we fold, we lose everything, so hold the line. Hold it because your families are counting on you. Hold it because this is your home. Hold it because sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do. Hold the line. 60 voices responded in ragged unison. Hold the line. Steve raised his shield as the Cardassian forces advanced through the dying light, and in orbit above, Captain Picard watched sensor readings with growing dread, knowing that principles were about to collide with reality in the bloodiest way possible. The Cardassian advance was methodical, professional, and utterly terrifying. 150 soldiers moved in staggered formations, using cover and advanced tactics that spoke to years of military doctrine. They weren't rushing, they were strangling, tightening the noose with inevitable precision. Steve watched from the rooftop, calculating firing solutions, identifying squad leaders, marking heavy weapons emplacements. His enhanced vision picked out details in the fading light: a commander gesturing orders, a specialist adjusting a targeting scanner, troops spreading to minimize casualties from concentrated fire. They'd learned from the earlier engagements. They knew the colonists had someone coordinating defense. They were adapting. "Steady," Steve called over the comm. "Wait for the mines. Discipline wins this." The first Cardassian squad crossed into the mining charge perimeter. Nothing happened. Steve's stomach dropped. Either the charges failed or the Cardassians had detected and disabled them. Either way, the trap was. The western approach erupted in fire and thunder. Sarah's improvised mines detonated in sequence, not all of them, but enough. 3 squads were caught in overlapping blast zones, thrown back by concussive force that turned tactical advance into chaos. Soldiers stumbled. Formations broke. And for 10 seconds the Cardassian assault faltered. "Now," Steve roared. "All positions, fire." 60 colonists opened up simultaneously. Energy bolts and projectile rounds converged on the disoriented Cardassians, catching them exposed and vulnerable. It wasn't professional military fire. Accuracy was mixed. Some shots went wild, but volume compensated for precision. The western advance stalled completely, troops diving for cover or retreating to regroup. But the eastern and southern approaches kept coming. Steve marked the greatest threat: an eastern squad with heavy plasma repeater advancing on Emma's position. She and 3 other colonists were firing steadily, but they couldn't stop that weapon once it deployed. "Emma, fall back to secondary position. Now. But we can hold." "That's an order." "Move." Steve was already running, crossing the rooftop at full sprint and launching himself toward the eastern barricade. He dropped 15 feet, shield-absorbing impact, and rolled directly into the advancing Cardassian formation. The plasma repeater operator swung the weapon toward him. Steve, through his shield, watched it strike the weapon's power cell, disabling it, then ricochet unpredictably off a barricade support and careen into the darkness. Wrong angle. The shield's behavior in this universe was still not fully predictable. No time to retrieve it. Steve went hand to hand, unarmed, against 6 Cardassian soldiers. They converged with disciplined aggression, trained close-quarters combatants who'd practiced exactly this scenario. But they'd never practiced against someone with Steve's capabilities. He blocked a rifle strike, redirected the weapon, and used the soldier's own momentum to throw him into his squadmate. Ducked under a knife thrust, delivered a precise nerve strike, spun to avoid phaser fire and closed distance with another soldier. His fighting style was brutal efficiency, no wasted motion, every strike calculated to disable without killing. A Cardassian commander recognized the threat and ordered his troops to fall back and shoot from range. Smart tactics. But Steve was faster. Using the soldiers he'd disabled as mobile cover, staying inside their firing solution, turning their discipline against them. Within 30 seconds, the squad was neutralized. Steve retrieved his shield from where it had landed in the dust, breath coming hard but controlled. Enhanced physiology meant he could maintain this pace. But even super soldiers had limits. "Rogers." Marcus Trent's voice was urgent over the comm. "South wall, they're bringing up breaching charges. If they blow the wall, I see them. 50 meters south." A Cardassian engineering unit was planting explosive charges on the community center's weakest structural point, the north wall Sarah had identified earlier. Once detonated, Cardassian troops would pour through the breach directly into the civilian shelter areas. Steve calculated distances and probabilities. 50 meters under fire. Exposed ground. Multiple soldiers with clear sight lines. Even with enhanced speed, he'd take hits. Maybe fatal ones. But if that wall came down, colonists died. Children died. Everything they'd fought for ended. Simple choice. Steve sprinted into the open. Shield raised, trusting vibranium to keep him alive. Phaser fire converged from 3 directions, most deflected, some absorbed, a few punching through his guard to score burning hits on his legs and torso. Pain registered distantly. Suppressed by combat focus and enhanced healing already beginning repair work, he covered the 50 meters in 6 seconds. The engineering unit saw him coming too late. Their commander reached for the detonator remote. One press would blow the charges and bring down the wall regardless of whether Steve stopped them. Steve threw his shield at the detonator. Time seemed to slow. The shield spun through the air, arcing perfectly, striking the remote and shattering it before the commander could trigger the charges. The shield ricocheted, struck a support beam, and returned to Steve's hand as he crashed into the engineering unit. Disabled the first soldier with a shield strike. Blocked return fire from the second. Swept the third's legs, delivered a controlled strike to ensure unconsciousness, spun to face the fourth. The detonation wasn't from the breaching charges. It came from above. Orbital strike. The plasma bolt hit 200 meters west of the community center, a warning shot from the Cardassian warships in orbit. The impact crater glowed with residual energy, and the shockwave knocked colonists off their feet. Steve's communicator crackled. Gulivek's voice. Satisfied and cold. Impressive, Captain Rogers. You've cost me 20 soldiers and delayed the inevitable. But now we escalate. My warships have targeting solutions on your entire settlement. Surrender immediately, or the next shot won't be a warning. Steve looked up at the sky. Where somewhere beyond atmosphere 3 Cardassian warships hung like executioners. One more shot and dozens of colonists died. Maybe all of them. You'd kill everyone? Steve demanded. Civilians, non-combatants, children. I'd eliminate hostile resistance in Cardassian territory. Yvette corrected. A distinction your Federation friends understand very well. They're watching right now, Captain Rogers. The Enterprise is monitoring this entire engagement. And they're doing nothing, because they know intervention means war. You're alone. You've always been alone. So surrender. Let the colonists evacuate, and accept that some battles can't be won. Steve looked around at the colonists, exhausted, wounded, terrified, but still standing. Emma clutching her rifle, jaw set with determination. Marcus Trent covered in dust and blood, leading by example. Sarah coordinating ammunition distribution, turning engineers into soldiers through necessity. They were asking him what to do. Whether to keep fighting or accept defeat. He'd made this choice before. Different war, same fundamental question. Do you surrender when the enemy has all the advantages, or do you stand anyway? In 1945, he'd flown a plane into the Arctic rather than let Hydra win. He'd chosen sacrifice over surrender because some principles mattered more than survival, but that was his choice to make. Not theirs. Marcus, Steve said quietly, opening a private channel. It's your call. Your people, your home. I'll fight as long as you want me to fight. But those warships can end this in seconds. You need to decide: stand and risk everyone, or evacuate and live. Marcus Trent was silent for a long moment, staring at the glowing crater where Cardassian firepower had demonstrated absolute dominance. I hate this, Marcus said finally, voice breaking. I hate that they win. I hate that we fought so hard and it still wasn't enough. I hate that the Federation watches and does nothing while we lose everything. I know. But I won't sacrifice these people's lives for pride. We fought. We proved we weren't helpless. That has to be enough. Marcus activated the general channel, his voice steady despite the pain evident in every word. All positions, this is Trent. Stand down. We're accepting evacuation. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, weapons lowered. Colonists stood from their positions, hands raised, surrender accepted. Not because they were cowards, because their leader made an impossible choice to save lives rather than lose them, proving a point. Steve activated his communicator. Gulivek. The colonists are standing down. Cease fire and allow Federation evacuation. Acceptable. But Captain Rogers, you will remain. You attacked Cardassian forces, disabled military equipment, killed 2 of my soldiers. Those are acts of war. The colonists can leave. You answer for your crimes. Ice ran down Steve's spine. He'd known this was coming, the price for his intervention. But hearing it stated, so coldly, made it real. That's not happening. Picard's voice cut across the channel. Captain Rogers acted as an independent civilian. He has the right to asylum aboard a Federation vessel. He has the right to nothing. Yvette snarled. He interfered in Cardassian sovereignty. He will face Cardassian justice. Over my dead body. Steve said quietly. That can be arranged. The standoff crystallized. Cardassian ground forces held position, weapons trained on the community center. Warships in orbit maintained targeting locks. The Enterprise hung in space, unable to intervene without starting an interstellar incident. And Steve Rogers stood in the center of it all. Shield on his back. Surrounded by colonists who'd fought beside him and lost. His communicator crackled with a new voice: Admiral Nechayev, distant but clear. Captain Picard, transport all colonists immediately. Emergency authorization granted. But Captain Rogers is to remain on the surface pending Cardassian custody transfer. Admiral, you can't be serious. That's an order, Captain. One super soldier is not worth a war with Cardassia. Mr. Rogers made his choices. Now he faces consequences. Steve closed his eyes briefly. He'd known this possibility existed. He'd violated Starfleet orders, acted independently, started a fight that could have escalated into system-wide conflict. By the Federation's rules, by Starfleet's regulations, He was guilty of everything Avec accused him of. But the colonists were alive. They'd stood their ground. They'd proven freedom mattered. Sometimes that had to be enough. Enterprise. Steve said. Transport the colonists. All of them. I'll handle my situation. Captain Rogers. Picard's voice carried genuine distress. Do it, Captain. They didn't ask for this fight. I did. Get them out. Marcus Trent grabbed Steve's arm. No. We don't leave you behind. You fought for us. And now I'm asking you to survive, Steve said firmly. Take your people. Rebuild somewhere safe. Remember that you stood up when standing up mattered. That's worth more than one soldier's freedom. Captain Rogers. A female voice counselor Troy spoke over the channel. I'm sensing your resolve. But I'm also sensing you have a plan. What are you planning? Steve smiled slightly. Empaths were inconvenient sometimes. I'm planning to trust that doing the right thing leads to the right outcome. Even when I can't see how. The Enterprise's transporters activated. Colonists began shimmering, dissolving into streams of light that arced toward orbit. Emma vanished mid-protest, rifle still in hand. Sarah disappeared while trying to argue. Marcus Trent met Steve's eyes one final time, mouthed thank you, and dematerialized. Within 30 seconds, the settlement was empty except for Steve Rogers, surrounded by Cardassian soldiers, facing an enemy that had every advantage. Gul Evek's voice carried satisfaction. Wise choice. Captain. Ground forces. Secure the prisoner. Use restraints and be cautious, he's dangerous. Cardassian soldiers advanced carefully, weapons trained, approaching like they were capturing a wild animal. Steve didn't resist as they applied restraints to his wrists, some kind of energy field that locked his hands behind his back. They took his shield, handling it with appropriate caution. You fought well, the Cardassian commander said, almost respectfully. Under different circumstances. You'd make a fine soldier. Under different circumstances, Steve replied. We wouldn't be enemies. They marched him toward a Cardassian transport, a sleek military shuttle designed for prisoner transfer. Steve cataloged his surroundings automatically, guard positions, weapon placements, exit vectors, planning escape even as logic said escape was impossible. The shuttle's interior was utilitarian bare metal. Harsh lighting. Restraint points built into walls. They secured him to a bench. Energy restraints humming as they locked him in place. Gul Evek appeared on a view screen. His expression triumphant. Captain Rogers. You'll be transferred to a Cardassian detention facility for processing. You'll be tried under Cardassian law for acts of war against the Union. The sentence is typically execution, though I suspect my superiors will be interested in studying you first. Your enhanced physiology, your combat capabilities, very valuable information. You won't learn anything, Steve said calmly. The serum that made me died with its creator 70 years ago. In my universe, anyway. You can study me all you want, you won't be able to replicate it. Perhaps. But the attempt will be educational. For both of us. The view screen went dark. The shuttle lifted off, engines thrumming, carrying Steve away from Dorvan V toward a Cardassian warship waiting in orbit. Through a small viewport, he could see the Enterprise in the distance, Picard's ship holding position, unable to act without violating everything the Federation stood for. Steve had made peace with consequences long ago. He'd known going into that community center that his actions might cost everything: freedom, home, life itself. But some things were worth that cost. The colonists were safe. They'd stood their ground and survived. Emma would grow up free. Marcus would rebuild. Sarah would engineer something beautiful from the ashes of loss. That had to be enough. The shuttle docked with the Cardassian warship, a hard clang of metal on metal. Guards hauled Steve through corridors lined with soldiers who watched with mixture of curiosity and hostility. They took him to a detention cell 4 meters square, force field instead of bars, complete isolation. They removed the physical restraints but left him trapped behind the force field. One guard remained posted outside. Phaser ready. Steve sat on the bare metal bench that served as furniture and assessed his situation. Prisoner of a hostile power. No allies. No backup. No apparent escape route. The Cardassians would study him. Interrogate him. Probably torture him for information he didn't have. Eventually they'd execute him or keep him imprisoned indefinitely. By any rational measure. He'd lost. But Steve Rogers had never measured victory in rational terms. He'd saved lives today. He'd given people hope. He'd proven that standing up to injustice mattered, even when the galaxy said it didn't. Sometimes that was victory enough. He closed his eyes and waited to see what happened next, trusting that somehow, somewhere, the story wasn't over. Because heroes didn't give up. Even when captured. Even when alone. Even when every rational person would say the battle was lost. In orbit nearby, Captain Picard stood on the Enterprise bridge, staring at the Cardassian warship where sensors indicated Captain Rogers was being held. "Captain," Riker said quietly, "we can't just leave him there." "I'm aware." Number 1. The Prime Directive doesn't cover dimensional refugees, Worf added. "Technically, Captain Rogers is not bound by Federation law. His capture is illegal under multiple treaties." "Also aware, Mr. Worf." Data turned from his station. "Captain, I have analyzed the situation and calculated 372 scenarios for Captain Rogers' rescue. Approximately 47 have success probabilities above 30%. Picard looked at his senior officers, all of them ready to act. To violate orders. To risk everything for someone they'd known less than a day. Because Steve Rogers had shown them something the Federation had forgotten. That sometimes the right thing was also the hard thing. And you did it anyway. Mr. Data, Picard said carefully. Begin working on those scenarios. Quietly. And find me every legal loophole. Every treaty technicality. Every diplomatic option that might apply. Number 1, contact Starfleet Command. Use every favor I've accumulated over 30 years if necessary. Lieutenant Worf, prepare tactical options. Nothing that starts a war. But everything short of it. Aye. Captain. They chorused. Counselor Troy approached Picard's chair, speaking softly. You're going to rescue him. Despite Admiral Nechaev's orders. I'm going to explore all available options, Picard corrected. If one of those options happens to result in Captain Rogers' freedom, well, that would be fortunate. He changed your mind. About intervention. About action. Picard was quiet for a moment, watching the Cardassian warship on the view screen. He reminded me, Picard said finally, that rules serve principles, not the other way around. That restraint is wisdom, but paralysis is cowardice. And that sometimes, a man with a shield and unshakable convictions can accomplish what an entire starship cannot. So we fight for him. So we fight, Picard agreed. Within the constraints we have, using every tool available. Because Captain Rogers stood up when standing up mattered. The least we can do is ensure he didn't sacrifice himself for nothing. On the Cardassian warship, Steve Rogers sat in his cell, eyes closed, breathing steady, and waited. He'd been captured before, he'd been imprisoned, interrogated, tortured. He'd survived ice and emerged unchanged. He'd fought gods and monsters and his own government when necessary. This was just another challenge. And Steve Rogers didn't quit. Not when frozen. Not when outnumbered. Not when captured in an alien universe 300 years in his future. Never. The Cardassian interrogation room was designed for psychological intimidation, harsh lighting from above, bare walls that absorb sound, a single chair in the center with restraint points. Steve had seen rooms like this before, in different wars, serving the same purpose, break the prisoner's spirit before asking any questions. 2 guards led him to the chair and secured his wrists. The restraints hummed with energy fields that would shock him if he pulled against them. A small reminder that resistance had consequences. Gulivek entered, flanked by a Cardassian female in Science Directorate insignia and a lean male with the bearing of intelligence operative. They arranged themselves in a triangle around Steve, classic interrogation positioning designed to make the subject feel surrounded, vulnerable. Captain Rogers. Yvek began. His tone conversational. I've been reviewing your combat footage. Remarkable performance. You disabled 43 of my soldiers. Destroyed or damaged significant equipment. And coordinated a defense that should have collapsed within minutes. All without killing a single Cardassian. That restraint is unusual. Why? Because taking a life should never be easy, Steve said. Your soldiers were following orders. I was stopping them. Not punishing them. The female scientist, her nameplate read Corel, leaned forward, scanning Steve with a handheld device. Fascinating. His cellular structure is significantly enhanced. Muscle density 40% above human baseline, bone structure reinforced, metabolic efficiency extraordinary. This is genetic modification, not technological augmentation. The process was called Project Rebirth, Steve said flatly. It happened in 1943 inches my universe. The creator was murdered, the formula lost. You're wasting your time trying to replicate it. Let us be the judge of that. Corel replied. She adjusted her scanner. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures around your cellular bonds, something that shouldn't exist in baseline humans. The enhancement goes deeper than simple genetic modification. There's an underlying pattern, almost like a quantum imprint. What was in this serum? I don't know. Dr. Erskine never told me the complete formula. He said it wasn't just chemicals, it amplified what was inside. Good became great. Bad became worse. He chose me because. Steve paused. Old memories surfacing. Because I knew what it was like to be weak. To be helpless. He trusted I'd remember that even after becoming strong. The intelligence operative Glyn Darrow circled behind Steve's chair. And yet you used that strength to interfere in Cardassian affairs. To attack our soldiers. Destroy our equipment. Delay our lawful enforcement of territorial sovereignty. Those are acts of war, Captain Rogers. I defended civilians who asked for help. You violated interstellar law. The Federation's Prime Directive expressly forbids. I'm not Federation, Steve interrupted. I'm not bound by their rules. I'm a soldier from another dimension who saw people in trouble and helped them. That's not a crime, it's basic human decency. Human decency, Yvette repeated. Amusement evident. How quaint. Tell me, Captain, did your human decency inform those colonists that their resistance was futile? That they were fighting for a settlement they'd inevitably lose? That your intervention only delayed the inevitable and cost Cardassian lives in the process? They knew the odds. They chose to fight anyway. That's called freedom, something your union doesn't seem to value. Yvette's expression hardened. The Cardassian union values order, strength, and proper authority. We ended centuries of chaos by embracing hierarchy and discipline. Your Federation's idealism, their worship of individual rights over collective good, it breeds weakness. It's why they stood by and watched while their own citizens died. It's why you're here, alone, while they scurried away to avoid political complications. Steve met his gaze steadily. If believing in freedom makes me weak, I'll take weakness over your kind of strength any day. Bold words for someone in restraints. Yvette nodded to Glyn Darrow. Begin the interrogation. I want to know everything: his universe of origin, the nature of his enhancement, the technology behind that shield, and most importantly, whether the Federation has more like him hidden away. Use whatever methods necessary. Darrow moved to a control panel. The energy restraints intensified, sending jolts of pain through Steve's nervous system. Not enough to cause permanent damage, just enough to establish that compliance was preferable to resistance. Steve gritted his teeth, breathing through the pain. He'd been tortured before. Hydra had tried, failing to break him over months of captivity. Red Skull himself had attempted it, using methods that would have destroyed normal men. Steve had learned long ago that physical pain was temporary, but compromising principles lasted forever. Where is your universe of origin? Darrow demanded. Don't know. I came through a quantum realm accident. No coordinates. No map. Just a rupture in space-time. The shield. What is vibranium and how is it manufactured? Vibranium is a metal from my Earth. Near indestructible, absorbs kinetic energy. It was a unique deposit in Africa. You can't manufacture it because it doesn't exist in this universe. Enhanced capabilities, can they be transferred to others? No. Like I said, the formula died with its creator. I'm the only one. The interrogation continued for an hour. Questions repeated, phrased differently, asked from multiple angles. Darrow used psychology and pain in measured doses, trying to find inconsistencies, catch lies, extract information Steve didn't have. But Steve had survived worse. He gave them nothing useful, just the basic facts they could observe themselves, wrapped in enough detail to seem cooperative without compromising anything important. Finally, Yvette held up a hand. Enough. He's telling the truth about not knowing technical details. The enhancement is instinctive to him, he can't explain what he doesn't understand. He stepped closer to Steve, studying him like a specimen. You're a relic, Captain Rogers. A throwback to an era when wars were simple, enemies were clear, and heroes charged into battle believing righteousness would prevail. The galaxy has moved beyond such naivety. Has it? Steve asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, nothing's changed. You're still invading settlements, still killing civilians, still using might to justify right. Different weapons. Same tyranny. And you're still fighting battles you can't win, believing sacrifice matters more than victory. Yvette turned to Corell. Take tissue samples, genetic analysis, cellular mapping, everything. If we can't replicate the enhancement, we can at least understand it. Perhaps we'll find weaknesses to exploit. Corell approached with medical instruments, but before she could begin, alarms shrieked throughout the ship. A voice crackled over the intercom, urgent. Professional. Alarmed. Golevec. We have an emergency situation. 3 Romulan warbirds just decloaked off our starboard bow. They're hailing us. Avek's expression shifted from satisfaction to concern. Romulans? Here? This sector is outside their usual patrol routes. He tapped his communicator. Bridge. On my way. Put the Romulans on screen but do not respond until I arrive. He looked back at Steve. Your interrogation is postponed, Captain, But don't celebrate yet. Romulan interest in you is considerably worse than Cardassian custody. They'll want to dissect you to understand your enhancements, then use the data to create their own super soldiers. At least we believe in trials before execution. Evek and his team left, the door sealing behind them with a pneumatic hiss. Steve was alone in the interrogation room, still restrained, but now with valuable information. The Romulans were here. He didn't know if that was good or bad, but it was definitely a variable change. And variables meant opportunities. Steve tested his restraints carefully. The energy fields were sophisticated. They detected resistance and increased power accordingly. Brute force wouldn't work, but the restraints were designed for normal humanoid prisoners. Not someone with enhanced strength and accelerated healing. He pulled slowly, steadily, letting the pain build but not triggering the restraint's shock response. Enhanced muscles strained against energy bonds, tendons stretching to limits that would tear normal tissue. Steve's healing factor worked overtime, repairing microscopic damage as fast as it occurred, millimeter by millimeter. The restraints began to give. On the Cardassian bridge, Golevek faced the view screen where 3 Romulan commanders appeared, a female in the center flanked by 2 males. Commander Tomalak, according to intelligence databases, a name that carried weight in Romulan Star Empire circles. Commander Tomalak, Evek said carefully, this is unexpected. The Romulan Star Empire has no territorial claims in this sector. Nor do we require any, Tomalak replied smoothly. We detected unusual energy signatures during your recent engagement at Dorvan V. Specifically, we detected an individual with capabilities that warrant investigation. We believe you're holding this individual aboard your vessel. Our prisoners are Cardassian business. Not when they represent potential security threats to regional stability, Tomalak countered. We monitored the entire battle. This Captain Rogers demonstrated abilities beyond anything in current Federation or Cardassian arsenals. Such capabilities cannot be allowed to fall into adversarial hands. We're offering to take custody of the prisoner. For everyone's benefit, naturally. Evek's jaw ridges tightened. The prisoner is charged with crimes against the Cardassian Union. He will be tried under our laws. Or, a third voice interjected, he will be transferred to Federation custody as a diplomatic guest who acted independently. The view screen split, showing Captain Picard on the Enterprise bridge. He looked calm, but his tone carried steel. Golevek. Commander Tomalak, Captain Rogers is a dimensional refugee who arrived through circumstances beyond anyone's control. He has committed no crimes against the Federation, and his actions on Dorvan V were those of an independent civilian defending colonists who requested assistance. I am invoking Article 12 of the Khitomer Accords, which grants Federation vessels the right to provide asylum to displaced persons in disputed territories. The Khitomer Accords apply to Klingon space, Evek said flatly. The precedent applies universally, Picard countered. And more importantly, Commander Tomalak's presence here demonstrates that Captain Rogers has become a multi-faction interest. Cardassian custody will be contested by the Romulans. Romulan custody will be contested by the Federation and Cardassia. The only neutral solution is Federation asylum, where Captain Rogers can be held pending arbitration by all interested parties. Tomalak's smile was predatory. An interesting argument, Captain Picard. But it assumes we accept Federation arbitration. The Romulan Star Empire recognizes no such authority. Then we have a standoff, Picard said. 3 powers, each claiming jurisdiction, with a potential conflict that serves none of our interests. I propose a diplomatic solution. Captain Rogers is transferred to neutral custody of Federation Starbase with Romulan and Cardassian observers present. His status can be determined through proper channels, avoiding the need for unpleasantness. Evek studied the split screen, calculating odds. 1 Cardassian Galor-class warship versus 3 Romulan warbirds and the Enterprise. Even with 2 sister ships nearby, the tactical situation was unfavorable. I'll need to consult with Central Command, Evek said finally. You have 10 minutes, Tomalak said. After that, we will consider your continued custody of the prisoner an act of aggression and respond accordingly. The Romulan transmission ended. Picard's image remained. Golevek, Picard said quietly, I know you believe Captain Rogers should face Cardassian justice, but escalating this into a multi-power incident serves no one. Let me take custody. He'll be held securely, your grievances will be heard, and we avoid a conflict that could spread across multiple sectors. Evek wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it, military doctrine supported it, and his superiors would question any decision that looked like capitulation. But he was also a pragmatist who understood when tactical disadvantage required strategic retreat. If I agree, and I'm not saying I will, Captain Rogers must face consequences for his actions. The Cardassian Union will not accept his complete exoneration. I make no promises about outcomes, Picard said. Only that he'll be treated fairly according to established law and diplomatic protocols. That's more than he'll receive in Romulan custody, and possibly more than in Cardassian detention. Before Evek could respond, another alarm blared. Gul Evek, his tactical officer called out, the prisoner is attempting to escape. Energy restraints are failing. How is that possible? Unknown, sir. But sensors indicate he's breaking the restraint fields through sustained resistance. His enhanced physiology is overwhelming the containment systems. Evek swore in Cardassian. Of course the super soldier wouldn't stay restrained like a normal prisoner. Of course he'd find a way to complicate an already impossible situation. Security teams to the interrogation room. Use maximum force if necessary. He turned back to Picard. Your prisoner is escaping. That rather complicates your asylum proposal. Then I suggest you let him, Picard said. We'll beam him directly to the Enterprise during the confusion. You can report he escaped Cardassian custody through superhuman abilities, which is technically true, and avoid the diplomatic complications of formally releasing him. Everyone saves face. You're asking me to let a dangerous prisoner escape. I'm offering you a solution that prevents a three-way conflict over someone who was never your prisoner legitimately in the first place. Evek stared at Picard, seeing the careful diplomatic dance being performed. The Federation captain was giving him an out, a way to avoid looking weak while solving an increasingly dangerous situation. Pride warred with pragmatism. Pride lost. Security teams, Evek announced, his voice carefully neutral, maintain defensive positions but do not engage the prisoner directly. He is to be contained but not harmed. We're attempting diplomatic resolution. His tactical officer looked confused but obeyed. Gul. Evek returned his attention to Picard. You have 5 minutes, Captain. After that, my restraint ends and Captain Rogers becomes a legitimate military target. Understood. Enterprise out. In the interrogation room, Steve felt the restraints fail. The energy fields flickered, sputtered, and died as enhanced strength overwhelmed systems designed for normal physiology. His wrists were raw, bleeding, but already healing as he stood and assessed the situation. Locked door. No weapons. Multiple guards undoubtedly converging on his position. But Steve Rogers had escaped worse prisons. He moved to the door's control panel, examining the locking mechanism. Cardassian technology was sophisticated but not impenetrable. The panel was designed to be accessed from outside only, but the internal circuitry had to connect somehow. Steve drove his fist through the wall panel beside the door, enhanced strength punching through the metal like cardboard. Sparks flew as he grabbed the wiring beneath, yanking it free and carefully separating control circuits. Captain Rogers. Picard's voice crackled from his communicator still in his pocket, somehow missed by Cardassian security. We're tracking your position. Stand by for emergency transport in 30 seconds. But you need to reach the ship's transport inhibitor field perimeter approximately 40 meters forward from your current position. 40 meters through hostile ship, Steve muttered. Easy. He crossed 2 wires. The door hissed open. 5 Cardassian guards stood in the corridor, weapons drawn but not firing. They looked uncertain, clearly having received orders that contradicted their training. Stop the prisoner, but don't shoot him. Contain, but don't harm. Steve exploited that hesitation. He charged forward. Shield recovered from the guard station nearby, leading. The guards fired anyway. Phaser bolts striking vibranium and ricocheting unpredictably. Steve ignored the chaos, focusing on momentum, speed, closing distance before they could coordinate their fire. He hit the first guard with a shield strike controlled force that disabled without killing, spun to block incoming fire, rolled under a tackle attempt, came up behind 2 more guards and delivered precise nerve strikes. The Cardassians went down hard but alive. 40 meters. Steve ran through corridors that twisted and branched, following directional instinct and enhanced spatial awareness. Cardassian crew members scattered before him. Scientists, engineers, support personnel who had no desire to engage a super soldier in close quarters. 20 meters. A security checkpoint ahead, 6 guards in defensive positions behind portable barriers. They opened fire simultaneously, a coordinated barrage that even Steve couldn't dodge completely. Phaser bolts seared his legs, his shoulder, his side. Pain registered but didn't slow him. He'd fought through worse in World War II, kept moving when normal men would have collapsed. He vaulted the barrier, shield absorbing most impacts, and plowed through the checkpoint like a hurricane through paper. Guards scattered, disabled, overwhelmed by controlled fury. 10 meters. The corridor opened onto a maintenance bay, open space with equipment and a large window showing stars beyond. Steve could see the Enterprise in the distance, holding position. Captain Rogers, Picard's voice was urgent, Transport inhibitor field ends at your current position. But Gulivek has 3 seconds remaining on our agreement. You need to. Steve didn't wait. He dove through the maintenance bay. Trusting Federation technology and Picard's timing, the transporter beam caught him mid-leap, dissolving his molecular structure just as Cardassian guards reached the bay entrance. One moment Steve was on an enemy warship, surrounded by hostiles. The next, he was materializing on the Enterprise transporter pad, bleeding and exhausted but free. Dr. Crusher was waiting with a medical team. "Captain Rogers, you're injured." Later. Steve gasped. "Picard?" "Bridge, Captain," the transporter chief said. "He's expecting you." Steve ran, ignoring protests from medical personnel, ignoring the pain from multiple phaser burns, ignoring exhaustion that would have dropped a normal person. He reached the bridge in 90 seconds. Doors hissing open to reveal the command center in yellow alert status. Picard turned from the view screen, and for the first time since Steve met him, the captain smiled. "Captain Rogers. Welcome back. Though I should inform you that your escape has created considerable diplomatic complications." On the view screen, Gulivek's face was a study in barely controlled fury. "Captain Picard. You just committed an act of piracy against a Cardassian military vessel. This will not stand. Actually," data interjected from his station, "according to Cardassian military regulations, prisoners who escape through their own capabilities are considered to have successfully challenged their detention." Section 47. Paragraph 12 of the Cardassian Justice Code states. "I know what it states." Yvek snapped. "But that doesn't authorize Federation interference." "We interfered with nothing," Picard said smoothly. "Captain Rogers escaped. We merely provided transport at the moment he reached the inhibitor field perimeter. Technically, he was no longer aboard your vessel." The Romulan transmission opened, Tomalak appearing amused. "Fascinating legal gymnastics, Captain Picard. Though it leaves us with the same problem: custody of an individual who represents significant strategic value. Which is why," Picard said, "I propose we move forward with neutral arbitration as previously discussed. Captain Rogers will remain aboard the Enterprise under Federation custody until Until nothing," Steve interrupted. Every head on the bridge turned toward him. "With respect, Captain Picard, I appreciate the rescue, but I'm not going to be anyone's prisoner or custody. I'm a free individual who acted according to his conscience. If the Cardassians, Romulans, or anyone else has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly." Silence filled the bridge. Then Worf spoke, something like approval in his voice. "Captain Rogers has a point. He is not a Federation citizen. He is not bound by our laws or treaties. His actions on Dorvan V, while controversial, were those of an independent combatant defending civilians. Legally, he has committed no crime under Federation or interstellar law." "An interesting interpretation," Tomalak said, "but one that ignores the reality of power. The Romulan Star Empire has 3 warbirds. We can take Captain Rogers by force if necessary." "You're welcome to try," Steve said calmly, standing beside Picard's command chair. "But I should warn you, I don't go quietly." Picard glanced at Steve, seeing the absolute determination in those blue eyes. This wasn't bravado or foolishness, it was a man who'd stood against impossible odds before and refused to bend. "Commander Tomalak, Gulivek," Picard said carefully, "I propose a different solution. Captain Rogers remains free as an independent individual under temporary Federation protection. In exchange, he agrees to participate in diplomatic arbitration regarding his actions at Dorvan V. All parties present their cases, neutral mediators review the evidence, and a binding resolution is reached. No one loses face, no one starts a war. And we resolve this according to law rather than force." Steve looked at Picard. "I'm not apologizing for helping those colonists. Nor should you," Picard said quietly. "But you might consider that diplomacy sometimes achieves what combat cannot. Give the process a chance, Captain. Let us prove that justice can exist without warfare." For a long moment, Steve considered. Every instinct said fight, resist, never surrender. But he also recognized that Picard was offering a path forward that didn't require more bloodshed. "Fine," Steve said. "I'll participate in your arbitration. But I make no promises about accepting a verdict I disagree with. That's all I ask," Picard said. He turned back to the view screen. "Gentlemen, do we have an agreement?" Yvek and Tomalak exchanged glances, a rare moment of shared interest between traditional adversaries. "Agreed," they said in near unison. "Excellent. We'll proceed to Starbase 157, which maintains diplomatic facilities capable of hosting multi-faction proceedings. Enterprise out." The transmission ended. The bridge crew exhaled collectively, tension bleeding away. Steve swayed slightly. Exhaustion and injuries finally catching up. Dr. Crusher appeared at his side, medical tricorder already scanning. Captain Rogers. You have second-degree phaser burns across 40% of your body. Multiple contusions. And what I suspect is severe neural stress from those energy restraints. You're going to sickbay now, or I'll have Lieutenant Worf carry you there. Worf stepped forward, looking like he'd enjoy the opportunity. I can walk, Steve said, but his legs chose that moment to buckle. Strong Klingon hands caught him before he hit the deck. To sickbay. Worf rumbled, hoisting Steve with surprising gentleness. You have earned rest, Captain. Let us handle the politics. As Worf carried him toward the turbolift, Steve looked back at Picard. Thank you, Captain. For the rescue. For everything. Picard nodded. Thank you, Captain Rogers. For reminding us what we were in danger of forgetting. The turbolift doors closed, and Captain America disappeared toward medical treatment, leaving the bridge crew to contemplate the chaos one man with a shield had unleashed on their carefully ordered galaxy. Starbase 157 hung in neutral space, a massive orbital platform designed for exactly this kind of diplomatic crisis. Its conference halls had hosted treaty negotiations, peace talks, and interstellar arbitrations that shaped galactic politics. Now it would determine the fate of a super soldier from another dimension who'd violated half a dozen treaties by helping colonists defend their homes. Steve stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows in his assigned quarters, watching ships arrive. Cardassian warships maintaining cautious distance. Romulan vessels cloaked and uncloaked in subtle displays of power. Federation starships providing security. All because one man had decided standing by while people died wasn't acceptable. 3 days had passed since the escape from WWII-era's ship. 3 days of medical treatment, debriefings, and preparation for what Picard called the most important diplomatic proceeding you'll face in this universe. A door chime interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Counselor Troi entered, carrying a data PADD and wearing an expression of gentle concern. Captain Rogers, the arbitration begins in 1 hour. I wanted to check on your mental state before we proceed. I'm fine, Counselor. You're projecting determination and resignation in equal measure, Troi said, moving to stand beside him. That's not fine. That's someone preparing for either victory or sacrifice with no middle ground. This hearing isn't a battle, Captain. It's a process. Battles I understand. Processes that let politics override justice, those I have problems with. Troi studied him with those empathic senses that made lying impossible. You believe you'll be found guilty regardless of evidence. That the Federation will sacrifice you to maintain diplomatic relations with Cardassia and avoid provoking the Romulans. Won't they? I don't know, Troi admitted. But Captain Picard is arguing your case personally. He's assembled evidence, witness testimony from the colonists, and legal precedents from 3 centuries of Federation law. He believes in your cause, Captain Rogers. Give him the chance to prove that justice still matters. Steve turned from the window. In my time, I watched governments compromise principles for political expediency. I watched leaders betray everything they claimed to believe in because it was convenient. I don't expect this galaxy to be different. Then why fight at all? Troi asked gently. If you believe the system is corrupt, why participate in this arbitration? Because Picard asked me to. Because even a broken system sometimes works. And because, Steve paused. Old memories surfacing. Because giving up means they win, even if I lose. Fighting matters. Troi smiled. That's the man who inspired 60 colonists to stand against impossible odds. Hold on to that conviction, Captain. You'll need it in the chamber. The arbitration hall was designed for intimidation through grandeur. Vaulted ceilings, polished marble equivalent floors, and seating for hundreds of observers arranged in rising tiers. At the center, 3 judges presided, a Vulcan administrator representing logical neutrality, a human diplomat with decades of treaty negotiation experience, and a Bolian legal scholar known for rigorous interpretation of interstellar law. Steve entered flanked by Picard and Riker. His dress uniform replicated from his descriptions of formal military attire, drawing stares from the assembled observers. The blue and red, the star, the stripes, anachronistic symbols from Earth's past. Now walking through a courtroom that would determine his future. On the opposite side, WWII-era sat with a team of Cardassian legal advocates, their reptilian features arranged in expressions of righteous grievance. Further back, Romulan observers watched with calculating interest, looking like vultures waiting to claim whatever remained when the proceedings ended. The Vulcan judge administrator T'Pau called the chamber to order with a strike of a ceremonial gong. This arbitration convenes under Article 47 of the Federation Charter, regarding the actions of one Stephen Rogers, also known as Captain America, In relation to events at Dorvan V 3 standard days ago, the charges are as follows. Unauthorized interference in a military operation. Assault on Cardassian military personnel. Destruction of Cardassian property. And violation of territorial sovereignty. She looked directly at Steve. Captain Rogers, how do you answer these charges? Steve stood, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Not guilty. I acted as an independent civilian defending colonists who requested help. The Cardassians were attacking non-combatants in disputed territory. I had every right, moral and legal, to assist in their defense. The territory is not disputed. Evac interjected. Standing. The treaty clearly states. The treaty is ambiguous regarding Section 7. Picard countered. Also standing. Which is precisely why the colonists believed they had legal right to remain. Your military action was premature, occurring before arbitration committees had ruled on the territorial question. Irrelevant, the Cardassian advocate beside Evac said. Captain Rogers is not a colonist, he is not Federation. He has no legal standing to intervene in any capacity. Actually, the Bolian Judge Magistrate Brex consulted his data PADD, precedent exists. The Khitomer rescue of 2,293, where unaffiliated civilians assisted Klingon vessels under attack. The legal ruling established that independent actors may provide humanitarian aid in crisis situations without official sanction. That precedent applies to rescue operations. Not military defense. The Cardassian advocate argued. The human judge Ambassador Chen leaned forward. Captain Rogers. Let's address the central question. Why did you intervene at Dorvan V? You had no connection to the colonists. No stake in the outcome. Why risk yourself? Steve met her gaze steadily. Because they asked for help. Because I could help. Because standing by while innocent people die has never been acceptable to me, regardless of what politics or treaties say. I don't need a legal justification for doing what's right. Lickstai. And who determines what's right? Evac demanded. You? One individual with enhanced abilities, deciding which laws apply and which don't? That's not justice, it's vigilantism, it's chaos. It's conscience, Steve replied. Something your military seems to have forgotten during your attack on farmers and teachers. The chamber erupted in murmurs. T'Pau struck the gong again, calling for order. Captain Rogers. We are addressing legal questions, not moral ones. Your personal ethics, while perhaps admirable, do not supersede established law. Can you provide any legal justification for your actions? Picard stepped forward. Administrators. If I may present evidence. First, recordings from the Enterprise showing that the Cardassian attack began with orbital bombardment and ground assault on civilian structures. Under the Seldennis IV Convention, such attacks constitute war crimes regardless of territorial disputes. Second, testimony from colonist Marcus Trent, the view screen activated, showing Marcus Trent's recorded statement. His face was haggard but determined as he spoke directly to the camera. Captain Rogers saved our lives. The Cardassians weren't enforcing law, they were executing settlers who refused to abandon homes we'd built over 5 years. They killed my wife. They shot at children. Captain Rogers gave us hope, organized our defense, and kept us alive until the Enterprise could evacuate us. If that's a crime, then your justice system is broken. The recording ended. The chamber was silent. Emotional testimony, the Cardassian advocate said dismissively. But it doesn't change the fact that Captain Rogers violated established protocols. His actions, however well-intentioned, created a diplomatic crisis that threatens regional stability. And the alternative? Riker interjected. Let 200 colonists die to avoid political complications. That's not stability, that's complicity. Administrator T'Pau raised a hand, silencing both sides. The question before this tribunal is not whether Captain Rogers' actions were morally justified, but whether they were legally permissible under existing interstellar law. Captain Picard, you've argued that precedent exists for independent humanitarian intervention. However, that precedent has never been extended to active military defense. The Khitomer rescue involved civilians assisting with evacuations, not engaging in armed combat. Then perhaps the precedent should be extended. Picard said. Captain Rogers represents a unique case, an individual from outside this universe's political structures, acting on principles that transcend our treaties and alliances. He owes allegiance to no government, follows no chain of command. He acted according to conscience in defense of civilians under attack. If we punish that, we establish a precedent far more dangerous than the one we're avoiding. That doing the right thing is illegal when it's politically inconvenient. The Romulan observer, a woman in commander's insignia, stood unexpectedly. May I address the tribunal? T'Pau nodded. Commander Selleck, you may speak. The Romulan Star Empire has observed these proceedings with interest. Captain Rogers possesses capabilities that represent significant strategic value. However, we acknowledge that his actions at Dorvan V, while problematic, do not constitute acts of war against any recognized government. The Romulan Empire withdraws any claim to his custody or extradition. We consider this matter closed. Shocked silence filled the chamber. Even Picard looked surprised Romulans didn't abandon strategic advantages without reason. Commander Salak continued, her expression carefully neutral. However, we note for the record that individuals with enhanced capabilities operating independently create unpredictable variables in regional stability. The Federation would be wise to consider how they manage such individuals in the future. She sat down, leaving implicit threat hanging in the air. Let Rogers go, but control him, or we'll reconsider our position. Gulivek stood, his expression dark with fury. The Cardassian Union does not withdraw its charges. Captain Rogers killed 2 of my soldiers. Actually, Data's voice interrupted via comm channel from the Enterprise. Forensic analysis of Cardassian casualties indicates both fatalities resulted from accidents during combat, not direct action by Captain Rogers. 1 soldier was struck by ricocheting phaser fire from Cardassian weapons. The second suffered cardiac arrest during physical confrontation, likely due to pre-existing medical condition exacerbated by stress. Captain Rogers' attacks were consistently non-lethal when possible. Ivek's jaw ridges tightened. Nevertheless, he destroyed military equipment, assaulted soldiers in performance of duty, and interfered with lawful operations in disputed territory. Picard reminded him. During an operation that began with attacks on civilians in violation of the Seldonis Convention. Golivek. The Cardassian Union can press charges, but doing so requires acknowledging that your military actions at Dorvan V were legally questionable at best, criminal at worst. Is that the precedent you wish to establish? Ivek and his advocates exchanged glances. Picard had boxed them in. Pressing charges against Rogers meant opening Cardassian military conduct to scrutiny, admitting their attack violated humanitarian conventions, potentially facing war crimes tribunals themselves. This tribunal will recess for 1 hour. Administrator T'Pau announced. The judges will deliberate and return with a ruling. The gong struck, and everyone stood as the 3 judges exited through a rear chamber. Steve remained standing, watching them go, feeling the weight of judgment about to fall. Picard approached, speaking quietly. That went better than expected. The Romulans withdrawing was unexpected. They're playing a longer game, but it removes one major complication. And Data's forensic analysis undermines the most serious charges. What happens if they find me guilty? Steve asked. Depends on the severity. Possible outcomes range from formal reprimand and restricted movement within Federation space, to extradition to Cardassian custody, to Picard paused. To execution, Steve finished. I've been sentenced to death before, Captain. It's not as permanent as people think. You joke about it. I've learned that humor helps when you can't control the outcome. The hour passed slowly. Steve stood at the windows overlooking the Starbase's docking bays, watching ships come and go, massive freighters, sleek diplomatic vessels, warships, maintaining security. A galaxy so much larger than the one he'd known, filled with billions of beings pursuing lives and dreams he couldn't imagine. And yet fundamentally, nothing had changed. People still hurt each other. Governments still prioritized politics over principles. Justice was still something you had to fight for, not something freely given. The door chimed. Counselor Troy returning. They're reconvening. Are you ready? As I'll ever be. They returned to the arbitration chamber, taking their positions as the 3 judges entered. Their expressions were unreadable: Vulcan neutrality, human professionalism, Bolian thoughtfulness. Administrator T'Pau struck the gong. This tribunal has reached a decision. Captain Stephen Rogers. Please stand. Steve stood, shoulders back, meeting their gaze without flinching. Whatever came next, he'd face it standing. After careful consideration of evidence, testimony, and applicable precedents, this tribunal rules as follows. Captain Rogers' actions at Dorvan V, while outside normal diplomatic protocols, do not constitute criminal activity under Federation or interstellar law. His status as an extra-dimensional refugee places him outside existing jurisdictional frameworks. Furthermore, evidence suggests the Cardassian military operation at Dorvan V violated humanitarian conventions, creating a legitimate humanitarian crisis that justified independent intervention. T'Pau paused, letting the words settle. Steve felt something unfamiliar: hope, maybe, or vindication. However, she continued, Captain Rogers' enhanced capabilities and demonstrated willingness to act independently of established authority structures create genuine concerns for regional stability. Therefore, this tribunal issues the following conditions. Captain Rogers is free to remain in Federation space as a recognized refugee with full rights and protections. However, he will be required to register his capabilities with Starfleet security, undergo periodic check-ins with Federation authorities, and refrain from unauthorized military action in disputed territories. In essence, Ambassador Chen added, "You're free, Captain Rogers, but not free to start private wars. You'll have oversight, restrictions, and consequences if you violate the conditions. Do you accept these terms?" Steve considered. Registration, oversight, restrictions, everything his instincts rebelled against, but the alternative was continued custody battles, potential extradition, or spending his life running from multiple governments. And the colonists were safe. That had been the mission. Everything else was details. "I accept," Steve said. "With one condition of my own, I want regular updates on the Dorvan V colonists. Where they resettle, how they're doing. They fought beside me, I don't abandon people." T'Pau's eyebrow raised slightly, the Vulcan equivalent of surprise. "That can be arranged. This tribunal is adjourned. Captain Rogers, you are free to go." The gong struck a final time. The chamber erupted in noise, observers arguing, diplomats conferencing, journalists recording. Vulavec stood abruptly, his expression murderous, but restrained by his advocates. The Romulan observers departed silently, their calculation complete. Picard extended his hand to Steve. "Congratulations, Captain. You're a free man." Steve shook it, feeling the genuine warmth in the gesture. "Thanks to you. I couldn't have navigated this alone." "You inspired the defense," Picard said. "I simply presented evidence of what you'd already proven. That sometimes individual conscience must override collective caution. That's a lesson the Federation needed reminding of." Worf approached, something like approval in his stern expression. "Captain Rogers, you fought with honor. The colonists will remember your courage. That is a worthy legacy." "I just did what needed doing," Steve said. "That is what honor means," Worf replied. As they left the arbitration chamber, Steve caught sight of a view screen showing news coverage. His face appeared alongside headlines: "Dimensional refugee acquitted, super soldiers defense sparks diplomatic debate, hero or vigilante?" The Captain America question. Already the galaxy was trying to categorize him, define him, fit him into comfortable boxes. Steve smiled slightly. They'd been trying that since 1941. It never worked. They returned to the Enterprise, and as the ship departed Starbase 157, Steve found himself back at the observation lounge windows, watching stars stretch into warp-distorted lines. Picard joined him, 2 glasses of synthahol in hand. "A drink, Captain? To celebrate your acquittal?" "I don't drink on duty," Steve said automatically, then paused. "Though I guess I'm not on duty anymore. Don't even know what my duty is in this universe." "Perhaps that's something you'll discover," Picard said, setting both glasses aside. "The Federation is large, Captain Rogers. There are colonies that need protection, crises that require unconventional solutions, situations where someone with your unique perspective might make a difference. You offering me a job? I'm suggesting that a man with your capabilities and convictions will never be content sitting idle. The question is, how will you use that drive in a galaxy that's moved beyond your kind of heroism?" Steve thought about that, about colonists who'd fought beside him, about Picard's patient diplomacy, about Worf's warrior honor existing within Starfleet structure, about a Federation that valued restraint but still needed people willing to act when restraint became paralysis. "I don't know yet," Steve admitted. "But I know I can't go back to my universe. This is home now, whether I like it or not. Might as well figure out how to make a difference here." "Then perhaps," Picard said, "you'll allow me to recommend you to Starfleet Command for a consulting position. Independent contractor. No formal chain of command. But available for situations that require someone with your particular talents. You'd have oversight, as the tribunal required, but also autonomy to act according to your conscience. You trust me with that much freedom? I trust that you'll always try to do the right thing. Even when the right thing is hard," Picard said. "That's rarer than you might think, Captain Rogers. In my experience, the galaxy needs more people like you, not fewer, even when you complicate our carefully ordered diplomatic situations." Steve considered the offer, weighing freedom against responsibility, independence against oversight. It wasn't perfect. But nothing ever was. "All right," he said finally. "I'll try it. On one condition: when I think the Federation is making a mistake, I get to say so, loudly." Picard smiled. "I would expect nothing less. Though I suspect Admiral Nechayev will regret this arrangement within a month." They stood together at the window, watching the stars, 2 captains from different eras finding common ground in the vast darkness of space. Outside, the galaxy continued its eternal dance, wars and peace, conflict and cooperation, injustice and heroism playing out across billions of worlds. And now, moving through that galaxy, was Steve Rogers, a man out of time, out of dimension, but never out of purpose. The shield rested against the observation lounge wall, vibranium gleaming under ship lights, ready for whatever came next. 6 weeks after the arbitration, Steve Rogers stood in a Federation relief camp on Bajor, surrounded by refugees who'd fled Cardassian occupation. The camp was orderly but overcrowded, temporary shelters packed with families who'd lost everything, medical tents overflowing with injured, distribution centers rationing supplies that never seemed adequate. He'd come here at Starfleet's request not as a soldier, but as something the Federation was still trying to define. Consultant, advisor, independent contractor with specialized skills. The titles didn't matter. What mattered was that people needed help, and Steve Rogers knew how to help. A Bajoran woman approached, her nose ridges bearing the tattoo that marked her as a former labor camp survivor. Captain Rogers? I'm Kira Neres, liaison with the Bajoran Provisional Government. Commander Sisko asked me to brief you. Commander Sisko? Runs Deep Space Nine. The station near the wormhole. You haven't heard about it? At Steve's blank look, she smiled slightly. You really are new to this universe. The wormhole connects our space to the Gamma Quadrant 70,000 light-years in an instant. It's changed everything for Bajor, given us hope that we matter to someone besides the Cardassians who occupied us for 50 years. Steve heard the pain in her voice, the kind that came from surviving something that should have destroyed you. He'd heard that tone before. In concentration camp survivors after the war. Different galaxy, same scars. What do you need from me? He asked simply. Kira gestured around the camp. These people are traumatized. They've survived occupation, torture, starvation. Now they're free, but they don't know how to be free anymore. They need someone who understands what it's like to fight against impossible odds and win. Someone who can show them that standing up matters, even when everything says it doesn't. I'm not a counselor. No, but you're a symbol. When word spread that you defended those Dorvan V colonists, Bajorans noticed. We've been fighting Cardassians for half a century. Seeing someone stand up to them, someone from outside our conflict who just decided it was the right thing to do. She paused, emotion breaking through professional composure. It matters, Captain, more than you know. Steve looked around at the refugees, adults with haunted eyes. Children who'd known nothing but occupation. Elderly people who'd watched their world burn. He saw his own past reflected in their faces. Brooklyn immigrants fleeing persecution, displaced families during the Depression, survivors emerging from Nazi camps. I'll do what I can, he said. But I'm not making promises I can't keep. I can't fix this. I can't undo what's been done. We're not asking you to fix it, Kira said. We're asking you to show us that fighting back wasn't meaningless. That standing up to the Cardassians, losing people we loved, sacrificing everything, that it meant something. It always means something, Steve said quietly. Even when you lose. Over the following weeks, Steve worked alongside Bajoran relief workers, Starfleet personnel, and civilian volunteers. He organized distribution systems, helped establish security protocols, taught self-defense to refugees who were tired of being victims. But mostly, he listened. He listened to a teenager named Lupiza describe watching her parents executed for hiding a resistance fighter. He listened to an elderly man named Furel talk about 50 years of occupation, of slow suffocation as Cardassian culture tried to erase Bajoran identity. He listened to Kira herself, late one night when the camp was quiet, tell him about growing up in the resistance, learning to kill before she learned to read, becoming hard because softness meant death. How do you do it? She asked. You've fought in wars, seen terrible things. But you're not hard. Not broken. How? Steve thought about that question, one he'd asked himself countless times over the decades. I remember why I fight. Not against something, but for something. I fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. For the hope that things can be better. When you focus on the for, the against doesn't consume you. That's idealistic. Yeah, it is. But idealism kept me human when everything else tried to turn me into a weapon. I'd rather be idealistic and whole than pragmatic and empty. Kira was quiet for a moment. The prophets sent you. The who? The prophets, beings who live in the wormhole. They guide Bajor, protect us. When the emissary arrived, Commander Sisko, things started changing. The occupation ended. Now you're here, teaching us to hope again. That's not coincidence. Steve didn't know what to say to that. Prophecy and divine intervention weren't his wheelhouse. He was just a soldier from Brooklyn who'd been given extraordinary abilities and tried to use them well. But if these people needed to believe he was sent by their gods, maybe that was okay. People needed hope however they could find it. A week later, the call came from Picard: urgent, encrypted, marked priority 1. Steve took the transmission in a private tent, watching Picard's face materialize with unusual tension evident. Captain Rogers, we have a situation. The Enterprise is en route to Sector 001, the Sol system, Earth. Steve's chest tightened. What's happening? The Borg. They're launching another invasion. A single cube, but more than enough to assimilate Earth if we don't stop them. Starfleet is assembling every available vessel, but Picard paused. Old trauma flickering across his features. The Borg are adaptive, relentless, and they've assimilated my knowledge from my time as Locutus. They know our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses. We need unconventional approaches. We need someone who thinks outside established military doctrine. You need someone unpredictable, Steve said. Someone they haven't assimilated. Exactly. Captain Rogers, I know you've just begun finding your place in this universe. But Earth needs you. Humanity needs you. Not as a weapon, as a tactician who approaches problems differently. Will you help us? Steve thought about Earth as Earth, gone forever, lost to time and dimension. But this Earth, the one 300 years in his future, was still home to humanity, still the cradle of everything he'd fought to protect. When do I leave? Transport is waiting at the spaceport. You'll rendezvous with the Enterprise in 6 hours. Come ready for combat. Captain. The Borg don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They assimilate or they're destroyed. There's no middle ground. Understood. Rogers out. Steve gathered his few possessions, the shield, his uniform, the communicator Starfleet had issued him. Kira found him as he prepared to leave. You're going. Earth's under attack. They need help. She studied him with those fierce eyes that had seen too much suffering. You'll come back? If I can. Then go with the Prophet's blessing. Show the Borg what happens when they threaten people you care about. She handed him something, a small Bajoran earring, traditional symbol of faith. For luck. And to remember that what you do matters. Even when you can't see the outcome. Steve accepted it, touched by the gesture. Thank you. Kira. Keep fighting. Keep helping your people remember they're free. We will. Because someone showed us it was possible. The transport carried Steve to orbit, where a Starfleet runabout waited. The journey to the Enterprise took 4 hours at maximum warp. 4 hours Steve spent reviewing everything. Data had compiled about the Borg. Cybernetic collective consciousness. Billions of drones acting as one. Adaptive shielding that learned from every attack. Assimilation nanoprobes that turned individuals into drones, erasing identity and adding capabilities to the collective. They were everything Steve had fought against. Distilled to pure form, the individual consumed by the collective. Freedom replaced by forced unity. Diversity erased in pursuit of perfection. The Borg represented his worst nightmare made real. Which meant stopping them was exactly the kind of fight Steve Rogers was built for. The runabout docked with the Enterprise, and Steve stepped aboard to find the ship at red alert. Crew members rushed past, faces tight with controlled fear. Everyone knew what the Borg meant: loss. Assimilation. The end of everything if they failed. Picard met him in the transporter room. And Steve saw the weight of command pressing down on the captain's shoulders. Captain Rogers, thank you for coming. The fleet is assembling at Wolf 359, but we're 40 minutes from intercept. Admiral Hayes is in command, coordinating from the USS Defiant. We'll be part of the main assault force. Tell me about the cube. Size. Capabilities. Weaknesses. Standard Borg cube, 3 kilometers per side, shielding that adapts to weapons after 3 or 4 shots, transwarp capability allowing faster than light travel beyond our warp drive. Conventional tactics are ineffective. We tried everything during their last invasion 3 years ago. I was assimilated during that attack, designated Locutus of Borg. They used my knowledge to devastate Starfleet at Wolf 359. 39 ships destroyed. 11,000 casualties. Steve heard the guilt in Picard's voice, the burden of having been the weapon that killed his own people. That wasn't you, Captain. That was the Borg using your body. You're not responsible for their actions. Intellectually, I know that. But knowing and believing are different things. Picard straightened. Your quarters are prepared. I suggest you rest while you can. In 35 minutes, we face something that nearly destroyed us once before. I need you sharp. Captain Picard? Steve stopped him before he left. We're going to win. I don't know how yet, but we're going to win. Because giving up isn't an option. Picard allowed himself the smallest smile. Your certainty is either inspiring or terrifying. I'm still deciding which. Can it be both? In his quarters, Steve checked his shield one final time, the vibranium still gleaming despite everything it had endured. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. Frozen in ice. waking to a future that had moved beyond him. Fighting alongside the Avengers. Traveling through the quantum realm, ending up in an entirely different universe. Every step had prepared him for this moment. The Borg thought they were inevitable. They believed resistance was futile, that assimilation was destiny. They'd never met Steve Rogers. The ship-wide comm activated Picard's voice-carrying command authority. All hands, red alert. We're approaching the Borg cube. Battle stations. Steve secured his shield and headed for the bridge. As the doors opened, he saw the view screen dominated by a massive geometrical nightmare, the Borg cube, dark and menacing, growing larger as they approached. Around it, Starfleet vessels maneuvered, dozens of ships converging on the cube, weapons firing in coordinated volleys. Phaser beams and photon torpedoes struck the cube's shields, absorbed and deflected by adaptive technology. Shields at maximum. Worf reported. All weapons armed. Awaiting orders. Mr. Data. What are our tactical options? Picard asked. Limited. Captain. The Borg have adapted to all standard Federation weapons. Concentrated fire from multiple vessels can overwhelm their shields temporarily, but they compensate within seconds. Our best chance is finding a weakness in their power distribution network, but locating such a vulnerability requires thinking like they don't expect. Steve interrupted. He moved closer to the view screen, studying the cube. They're a collective. They share information instantly, adapt as a unified whole. That's their strength. And their weakness? Riker asked. They can't adapt to something they've never encountered. Data. You said conventional tactics don't work. So what if we don't use conventional tactics? What if we hit them with something completely unexpected? Picard turned to Steve. What did you have in mind? Steve looked at his shield, then at the view screen showing the massive Borg cube. An idea formed dangerous, probably insane, but no more insane than charging into enemy territory armed with nothing but enhanced abilities and belief that right mattered. Captain Picard. How close can you get me to that cube? Close? Captain Rogers. The Borg assimilate anyone who boards their vessel. You'd be a drone within minutes. Not if I move fast enough, Steve said. And not if I hit them where they're not expecting attack. They've adapted to your weapons, your technology. But they've never encountered someone like me. Someone who fights with instinct and improvisation instead of algorithms and tactics. Worf's expression shifted understanding and approval. A boarding action. One soldier against the collective. More than that, Steve said. A distraction. I board the cube. Cause chaos. Force them to focus internal resources on defending against an enemy inside their vessel. While they're distracted, the fleet concentrates fire on a single point. Overwhelm their shields before they compensate. It's suicide, Riker said. Maybe. Steve admitted. But I've died before. Didn't take. Picard studied Steve, seeing the absolute conviction in those blue eyes. This man had charged into a Cardassian assault to defend colonists he'd never met. He'd faced interrogation and torture without breaking. He'd stood trial before the galaxy and refused to compromise his principles. If anyone could survive boarding a Borg cube, it was Captain America, Mr. Worf. Picard said quietly. Prepare a shuttle for Captain Rogers. Maximum shields. Programmed to ram the cube's hull. Once he's aboard, the Enterprise will coordinate the fleet's attack. Aye, Captain. Steve moved toward the turbolift, but Picard stopped him. Captain Rogers, Steve, you don't have to do this. There are other options, other plans. None that will work, Steve said. This is what I do, Captain. I'm the guy who makes the hard calls and takes the impossible risks. Someone has to. Might as well be the guy who's already displaced in time, dimension, and universe. I've got the least to lose. That's not true, Counselor Troy said softly. You've found a place here. People who respect you, a purpose that matters. You have as much to lose as anyone, which is why I have to do this. Steve replied. Because I know what I'm fighting for now. Not just abstract principles, but actual people. Kira and her refugees. Marcus Trent and his colonists. Emma and Sarah and everyone who trusted me to stand up when standing up mattered. This universe gave me a second chance. The least I can do is fight for it. He entered the turbo lift. And as the doors closed, he saw Picard salute, a gesture of respect between warriors who understood what sacrifice meant. The shuttle bay was controlled chaos techs preparing the small craft, loading enhanced shields, programming the navigation computer for a collision course. Steve climbed aboard, securing his shield and checking the minimal controls. Captain Rogers, Data's voice came through the comm. I have calculated that your survival probability is 8.3%. However, if you succeed in boarding the cube and causing sufficient disruption, the fleet's chance of destroying the Borg vessel increases to 71%. Statistically, this is our best option. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Data. I did not intend to imply. I know. It's called sarcasm. I'll explain it later. If there is a later. I hope there is, Captain Rogers. You have become interesting. Steve smiled despite the tension. I'll take that as a compliment. Rogers out. The shuttle launched, accelerating toward the Borg cube as phaser fire lit the darkness around it. Steve watched the massive structure grow larger on his view screen. Kilometers of cybernetic nightmare, home to thousands of drones all connected in horrifying unity. He was about to board that ship. Alone. Against impossible odds. For a moment, Steve thought about everyone he'd lost over the years. Bucky, fallen from a train in the Alps. Peggy, left behind when he went into the ice. The Howling Commandos, friends who'd fought beside him and deserved to see the victory they'd earned. The Avengers, teammates scattered across time and space. All gone. All lost to history, dimension, fate, but their lessons remained. Their courage lived on in him. Bucky had taught him that loyalty meant standing with people even when it cost everything. Peggy had shown him that duty and love could coexist, that being a soldier didn't mean abandoning humanity. The Avengers had proven that standing together made impossible things possible. He carried them with him now, boarding a Borg cube in a universe 300 years removed from everything he'd known. Enterprise, Steve said into the comm. I'm beginning my approach. Tell Picard not to wait too long after I'm inside. The Borg adapt fast. Understood. Captain Rogers. Godspeed. Steve gripped his shield and braced for impact as the shuttle accelerated toward the cube's hull. This was it. The moment when everything came down to one man, one shield, and the unshakable conviction that doing the right thing mattered, even against impossible odds. The shuttle struck the cube's hull at full velocity, shields flaring, hull groaning, and Steve Rogers charged into the heart of the collective. Resistance, he thought, isn't futile. It's necessary. The shuttle's impact tore through the Borg cube's outer hull, creating a breach that vented atmosphere and debris into space before automated systems sealed the rupture. Steve emerged from the wreckage into a nightmare landscape of biomechanical horror corridors lined with alcoves where drones stood in regeneration cycles, their pale flesh studded with cybernetic implants, their eyes vacant and cold. They turned toward him as one. Intruder detected. Species 5618. Human, enhanced physiology. You will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. I've heard that before, Steve muttered, raising his shield. Didn't believe it then either. The drones advanced in synchronized formation, precise, efficient, inevitable. Steve charged to meet them, shield leading, and the collision was brutal. He struck the first drone with controlled force, sending it sprawling into others. The second reached for him with assimilation tubules, mechanical appendages designed to inject nanoprobes, and Steve deflected with his shield, the vibranium ringing like a bell in the confined space. They kept coming. No fear, no hesitation, no individual thought. Just the collectives will made manifest in hundreds of bodies converging on a single target. Steve fought like a whirlwind, shield work honed by decades of combat, enhanced reflexes allowing him to process threats faster than the drones could coordinate. He struck with precision, disabling joints, targeting cybernetic connections, exploiting weaknesses that individual fighters would protect but the collective considered acceptable losses. But for every drone he disabled, two more appeared. They were learning, adapting, adjusting their approach with each encounter. Soon they'd compensate for his speed, predict his patterns, overwhelm him through sheer numbers. Steve needed to cause more disruption. Needed to hit them where adaptation couldn't help. He ran deeper into the cube. Shield deflecting drone attacks. Enhanced stamina allowing him to maintain full combat speed. The corridors twisted and branched in geometric patterns that defied human design. This was architecture born from collective consciousness, optimized for efficiency rather than individual navigation. Steve found what he was looking for: a central power node, pulsing with green energy, feeding dozens of alcoves where drones regenerated. He didn't understand Borg technology, but he understood targets. He threw his shield with all his enhanced strength. The vibranium disk struck the power node dead center. The unpredictable properties of vibranium in this universe's physics created a cascading reaction energy feedback that overloaded the node, exploded outward, and sent electrical chaos through connected systems. Dozens of alcoves went dark. Drones stumbled, their regeneration cycles interrupted. The shield ricocheted through the chaos and returned to Steve's hand as explosions blossomed throughout the corridor. Enterprise. Steve gasped into his communicator. I just took out a power distribution center. Whatever you're planning, do it now. Picard's voice responded immediately. All ships, concentrate fire on coordinates Alpha 7. Maximum firepower, continuous barrage. Through the cube's hull. Steve felt the vibrations of massed weapons striking from outside. Phaser beams and photon torpedoes hammered at a single point on the cube's shields, and this time with internal systems disrupted, with resources diverted to dealing with an intruder inside their vessel. The Borg couldn't adapt fast enough. Their shields failed. Direct hits struck the cube's hull, tearing through armor, venting entire sections to space. The vessel shuddered, its collective consciousness struggling to coordinate damage control while fighting an enemy inside and out. Steve felt the cube listing, destabilizing. He'd bought them time, created the opening. Now he needed to survive long enough to see if it mattered. Drones converged from all directions, dozens. Then hundreds. The collective had decided Steve Rogers was the priority threat, dedicating massive resources to his assimilation or destruction. They grabbed at him with mechanical precision. Tubules extending. Voices speaking in unified horror. You will be assimilated. You will service us. Resistance is still not futile. Steve interrupted. Shield work becoming desperate as he fought back to back against overwhelming numbers. A drone grabbed his shoulder. Tubules piercing uniform and reaching for skin. Steve felt the sharp pain of nanoprobes entering his bloodstream, microscopic machines designed to rewrite his DNA, incorporate him into the collective. Erase Steve Rogers and replace him with another mindless drone. For 3 seconds, Steve felt the collective's consciousness pressing against his mind, billions of voices speaking as one, ancient and alien and absolutely certain of their purpose. They were inevitable. They were perfection. Individual thought was chaos that must be eliminated. Then something unexpected happened. The super soldier serum in Steve's blood enhanced cellular structure. Accelerated healing. Genetic modifications from another dimension reacted to the nanoprobes. His immune system, operating at superhuman efficiency, recognized the Borg technology as a threat and attacked with overwhelming force. Enhanced white blood cells swarmed the nanoprobes, destroying them faster than they could replicate. The collective recoiled. Biological distinctiveness cannot be assimilated. Enhanced immune response neutralizes nanoprobes. Subject Steve Rogers is incompatible. For the first time in Borg history, they'd encountered someone they couldn't assimilate through normal means. Steve Rogers' enhancements, born in a different universe with different physical laws, were fundamentally alien to anything the collective had encountered. Guess I'm too distinctive, Steve said, ripping free from the drone's grasp. Now get off my ship. Wait, your ship? Whatever. Get off. The cube shuddered again. Catastrophic damage from the fleet's concentrated assault reaching critical levels. Systems failed throughout the vessel. Life support collapsed in entire sections. And the collective's unified consciousness began fragmenting as processing nodes went offline. Captain Rogers. Picard's voice crackled through interference. The cube is destabilizing. We've inflicted catastrophic damage. You need to evacuate immediately. We're attempting to get a transporter lock on your position. Steve fought through drones toward what sensors indicated was an exterior hull breach, an opening to space where he could be beamed out. Enhanced strength allowed him to physically throw drones aside. Shield work creating a path through the chaos. He reached the breach just as the cube began its final death spiral. Through the opening, Steve could see stars. Federation ships maintaining distance. And the beautiful blue-green sphere of Earth in the distance. Home. Not his Earth. But Earth nonetheless. Still there. Still free. Because people had stood together and fought against something that claimed to be inevitable. Enterprise, I'm at the breach. Get me out of here. Transporter lock acquired. Energizing. Steve felt the familiar tingle of molecular dissolution as the transporter beam caught him, pulling him from the dying Borg cube. The last thing he saw before materializing on the Enterprise was the cube exploding, a cascade of secondary detonations that transformed 3 cubic kilometers of Borg technology into expanding debris. He materialized on the transporter pad to cheering. The transporter chief, normally stoic and professional, was grinning. Welcome back, sir. You crazy, magnificent bastard, you actually did it. Steve stumbled slightly. Exhaustion and injuries catching up now that adrenaline was fading. Dr. Crusher appeared with a medical team, scanning him immediately. Captain Rogers, you have multiple contusions, phaser burns, and my God, you were exposed to Borg nanoprobes. Why aren't you assimilated? All. Super soldier serum, Steve gasped. Enhanced immune system rejected them. Guess the Borg aren't as inevitable as they think. You're going to sickbay. Now. I need to see Picard first. Captain Picard can visit you in sickbay. You're going whether you walk or I have Lieutenant Worf carry you. Again. Steve allowed himself to be led to sickbay. where Crusher spent an hour treating injuries, analyzing his blood for residual nanoprobes, and muttering about reckless heroes who boarded Borg cubes alone. But beneath her professional frustration, Steve detected respect. When she finally cleared him for visitors, Picard arrived with Riker and Data. "Captain Rogers," Picard said. And for the first time, Steve heard genuine warmth in his voice. "What you did today was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've witnessed in 30 years of Starfleet service. Possibly both simultaneously." "I'm hearing that a lot lately," Steve said. "Did we win?" "The cube is destroyed. All Borg signatures eliminated. Earth is safe, thanks to your distraction allowing the fleet to concentrate fire effectively. Starfleet is calling it a decisive victory, our first truly successful defense against a Borg incursion." "How many ships did we lose?" 7 vessels. Approximately 3,000 casualties. Far fewer than Wolf 359. Picard paused. "Those people are alive because you gave us the opening we needed. Their families have you to thank." Steve thought about those 3,000 who didn't make it home. 3,000 names, faces, stories ended because the Borg had come hunting. Victory always carried that weight, the knowledge that winning still meant losing, that triumph was built on sacrifice. "They died defending their home," Steve said quietly. "That's something. Not enough, but something." "You understand," Picard said. "The cost of command, the burden of survival when others fall. I've carried that weight since Wolf 359. 3 years of remembering the 11,000 who died while I was Locutus, wondering if I could have done something different." "You couldn't have," Steve said firmly. "You were a prisoner, a weapon used against your will. Today, you got to fight back. You commanded a fleet, coordinated a defense, and saved billions. That's who you are, Captain Picard. Not the drone they made you into, but the leader who stands between Earth and its enemies. Remember that." For a moment, something shifted in Picard's expression, old guilt loosening its grip, replaced by hard-won acceptance. "Thank you, Captain Rogers, for the reminder. And for showing us that sometimes, the impossible simply requires someone stubborn enough to try anyway." 2 weeks later, Steve stood on the Enterprise observation deck, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. Starfleet had offered him official recognition medals, commendations, formal integration into their command structure. He'd politely declined all of it. "I'm not Starfleet," he'd told Admiral Nechayev during the debriefing. "I'm just someone who helps when help is needed. Titles and ranks complicate that." She'd accepted his refusal with surprising grace, noting that perhaps the galaxy needed people who operated outside official structures. As long as he maintained the oversight conditions from his tribunal, he was free to continue his independent consulting work. Counselor Troy found him at the observation deck, 2 cups of tea in hand. "I thought you might want company." "Thanks." Steve accepted the tea, though he barely tasted it. His mind was elsewhere, processing everything that had happened since arriving in this universe. "You're thinking about home," Troy observed. "Your original universe, the people you left behind." "Yeah. It's been 3 months since I arrived here. For all I know, no time past their quantum physics is weird like that. Or maybe decades have gone by. Either way, I'm not getting back. This is home now. How does that make you feel?" Steve considered the question honestly. "Lost, sometimes. This universe has wonders I never imagined: warp drive, transporters, a Federation that actually lives up to its ideals most of the time. But it's also got the Borg, the Cardassians, political complexities that make World War II look simple. I don't always know where I fit." "You fit exactly where you choose to be," Troy said gently. "You've made a difference here, Captain Rogers. The Dorvan V colonists are resettling on a new world, building homes, raising families because you gave them hope. The Bajoran refugees Kira told me about are healing, learning to be free again because you showed them that standing up matters. Earth is still here. Billions of lives continuing because you charged into a Borg cube when anyone rational would have called it suicide. I just did what needed doing." "Exactly. That's who you are. The man who does what needs doing, regardless of whether it's safe, convenient, or officially sanctioned. The galaxy needs people like you, Captain Rogers. Perhaps now more than ever." Steve watched Earth turning below, thinking about all the people down there who'd never know how close they'd come to assimilation. Who'd wake up tomorrow, live their lives, pursue their dreams because a soldier from another dimension had decided their freedom mattered more than his survival. That was enough. It had to be enough. "Captain Rogers," Picard's voice interrupted via comm. "I have a request. The Enterprise is departing for a diplomatic mission to the Klingon homeworld, delicate negotiations regarding the Khitomer Accords. Given your unique perspective and demonstrated ability to handle complicated situations, I'd appreciate your presence. Unofficially, of course." Steve smiled. Unofficially. That seemed to be his permanent status now, the consultant who wasn't quite military, the hero who operated outside official structures, the man from another time and dimension who somehow fit perfectly into the spaces between regulations and reality. I'll be there, Captain. When do we leave? In 2 hours. And Captain Rogers? Thank you. For everything you've shown us. The Federation had forgotten what it means to stand on principle rather than convenience. You reminded us. That's worth more than any tactical victory. The comm closed. Steve finished his tea and headed for his quarters to prepare. As he walked through Enterprise corridors, crew members nodded respectfully, not with the distant professionalism they showed superior officers, but with genuine warmth reserved for someone who'd proven himself through action rather than rank. He passed 10 forward, the ship's lounge, and glimpsed colonists from Dorfan V through the windows. Marcus Trent sharing a drink with his daughter. Emma laughing at something Sarah said. They'd requested passage on the Enterprise, wanting to thank Steve personally before settling their new colony world. They'd survived. They'd stood their ground. They'd proven that freedom was worth fighting for. Steve Rogers had made that possible. In his quarters, he cleaned his shield one final time, a ritual from decades ago, habits formed in a different universe but still relevant now. The vibranium gleamed under artificial lights, unmarked by the Borg assault, the Cardassian phasers, the countless impacts it had absorbed. The shield had traveled further than its creator Howard Stark could have imagined. Across dimensions, through time, into a future where humanity had achieved wonders. And it still served its purpose, protecting those who needed protection, standing between innocence and tyranny. Steve secured the shield to his back and looked at his reflection in the viewport, a soldier out of time, wearing a uniform from an era long past, carrying principles the galaxy considered outdated. But those principles had saved Dorvan V. They'd helped Bajoran refugees remember how to hope. They'd stopped the Borg and protected Earth. Some things, Steve thought, never became outdated. Justice, courage, compassion, sacrifice, these were universal constants that transcended time, dimension, and culture. The Enterprise engaged warp drive, stars stretching into lines as they departed Earth orbit. Ahead lay the Klingon Empire, diplomatic challenges, probably some crisis that would require unconventional solutions. Steve Rogers was ready. He'd been frozen in ice and emerged unchanged. He'd crossed dimensions and found purpose. He'd fought impossible battles and won when victory seemed impossible. This was his life now, moving through a galaxy that needed heroes but didn't always want them. Doing what was right regardless of whether anyone thanked him, standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. It was the same mission he'd accepted in 1943, in a shabby laboratory in Brooklyn, when a sickly kid named Steve Rogers had been offered a chance to become something more. The serum had changed his body. Time and dimension had changed his circumstances. But his purpose remained constant. Stand up to bullies. Protect the innocent. And never, ever give up. 300 years in the future, in a universe not his own, Captain America still stood for the same principles that had defined him from the beginning, and he always would.